Did you really think you could just move your parents into our house without asking me first, Kevin? My voice wavered between anger and disbelief as I confronted my husband, standing in the middle of the living room we'd shared for years. Kevin, my husband of 7 years, didn't even look up from his laptop. Instead, he smirked, an expression I had come to loathe. "Oh, Sophia, don't be so dramatic. It's just for a while, and besides," he said, his tone sharp and dismissive, "it's not like you have a say in this." His words felt like a slap across my face. Our charming two-story house, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, wasn't just a house to me. It was my home, my sanctuary. This wasn't just some property we picked out together. It was the house my grandparents had left me in their will. It was where I had envisioned us raising our son, Brian, free from the toxic shadow of Kevin's controlling family. I clenched my fists at my sides, my anger bubbling over. "Do you even remember that this house is in my name?" I shot back, my voice steady but sharp. Kevin's smugness faltered for a brief moment, replaced by uncertainty, but before he could respond, our 2-year-old son Brian toddled into the room. His little hands reached up toward me, oblivious to the tension filling the air. I forced a smile for Brian's sake, scooping him into my arms. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered, kissing his soft forehead. Holding him calmed me a little, but the anger inside me still burned. I glanced back at Kevin. "I'm not okay with this. Your parents have never respected me or our space. Why now, Kevin? Why bring them here, into my house, without even asking?" Kevin shrugged, his indifference stoking the fire of my frustration. "They're family, Sophia. You wouldn't understand." That word, family, hung heavy in the air. It echoed in my mind, mocking me. Kevin's family was nothing like mine. My parents, who ran a small but beloved coffee shop in town, were kind and warm, always supportive and loving. Kevin's family, on the other hand, was overbearing, judgmental, and controlling. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My stomach sank. I already knew who it was. I peeked through the peephole and saw them. Kevin's parents, Amber and Walter, standing on the porch with suitcases in tow. I turned back to Kevin, my voice low and firm.
"Fine.
Let them in." "But this isn't over," I said, thrusting Brian into his arms. I strode toward the door and opened it reluctantly. "Sophia, darling," Amber cooed as she swept past me, not even sparing me a glance. Her perfume lingered in the air, too strong, too overwhelming, just like her. Walter followed behind her, his face set in its usual stern expression. In all the years I had known him, he had barely acknowledged me, even on my wedding day. Now they were here, invading my space, making themselves comfortable as if they owned the place. I watched as Amber fluffed the throw pillows on the couch and Walter inspected the bookshelf. They were already settling in, and it made my skin crawl. Something inside me snapped. I realized I was done being the polite, accommodating daughter-in-law. I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. This is my house, my home. I won't let them take it over. The following days turned into a blur of unwelcome changes. Amber wasted no time making her presence known. She rearranged my kitchen, criticized my parenting, and treated the house as if it were hers. One morning, as I prepared breakfast for Brian, she sauntered into the kitchen, peering over my shoulder. "Brian shouldn't be eating that, Sophia. It's not healthy," she said, her tone dripping with disapproval. I clenched my teeth, struggling to stay calm. "It's just cereal, Amber. He's fine." She shook her head, her expression one of condescension. "In our house, we believed in a proper diet. You really should learn." Her comments were like tiny needles, pricking at my patience. I wanted to snap, but I held back, for Brian's sake. Meanwhile, Kevin was no help. He buried himself in his work, completely ignoring the growing tension in the house. One evening, as I was putting Brian to bed, Amber barged into his room without knocking. "He's still not sleeping through the night? You must be doing something wrong," she said, her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. I turned to her, my voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "I'm doing the best I can, Amber." Her eyes narrowed, and her tone turned icy. Clearly, your best isn't good enough. Maybe if you had a real job, some structure in your life, you'd manage better. My hands trembled with frustration. This is my house, Amber. You're a guest here. Don't forget that. She laughed, a cold, dismissive sound that made my blood boil.
Oh, dear.
Kevin never mentioned how delusional you are. This is his house too, and as his mother, I have every right to be here. The next morning, I reached my breaking point. I walked into Brian's room and found Amber rifling through his dresser drawers. What do you think you're doing? I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. Amber didn't even look up. I'm just organizing. This room is a mess, she said casually, as if her intrusion was perfectly acceptable. That's it, I snapped. My voice was louder now, fueled by fury. I want you out of my house.
Now.
Amber finally turned to face me, her expression smug and mocking. Your house, she said with a raised eyebrow. Oh, sweetie, you're just the wife. This is Kevin's house too, and he wants us here. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out of the room, my heart pounding, my mind spinning with anger and frustration. Something had to change. This was my home, my life, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, frustration, anger, all colliding with the gnawing sense of helplessness I felt. Kevin's dismissal of my feelings, Amber's constant intrusions, and the way they both acted as if I didn't matter in my own home, it was suffocating. I was tired of being pushed around, tired of my home being taken over by people who showed no respect for me or the life I had worked so hard to build. That night, lying in bed, my thoughts raced as I stared at the ceiling. A plan started to take shape, small at first, but growing clearer as the hours ticked by. I wasn't going to let this continue. I had been accommodating long enough, too long, really. It was time for me to reclaim my life, my home, and the future I wanted for Brian. Kevin and his parents had crossed a line, and it was time for them to realize that I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. The fight was just beginning, and for the first time in a long while, I felt ready. A few days later, Kevin blindsided me again during dinner, casually dropping another bombshell as if it were nothing. My parents need to stay with us longer, he announced, not even looking up as he shoveled food into his mouth. Their house is undergoing renovations. I froze mid-bite, feeling the heat of anger rush to my face. Longer? I said, my voice rising. Kevin, we never even discussed them staying here in the first place. He shrugged, still avoiding my gaze. It's just for a few more weeks. What's the big deal? I slammed my fork down on the table, unable to contain my frustration. The big deal, Kevin? The big deal is that your mother treats me like an intruder in my own home. Before he could respond, Amber, who had been eavesdropping from the living room, waltzed in with her usual air of superiority. Sophia, you're overreacting, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. We're family. You should be more accommodating. Her words grated on me, but I bit my tongue, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of a retort. That night, as I lay awake again, their voices replayed in my head, each word fueling my resolve. I was done playing nice. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called my brother, James. He had always been my rock, my confidant. The second I heard his voice, I broke down. They're taking over my life, James, I said, my voice trembling. I can't take it anymore. His voice was steady, reassuring. Sophia, you have to stand up for yourself. Don't let them bully you. It's your house. They have no right to make you feel this way. His words were the push I needed. After he hung up, I took a deep breath and started preparing for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. I began gathering evidence of Amber's overbearing behavior, the way she had rearranged my kitchen without asking, the disrupted routines she imposed, and her endless belittling comments about my parenting. By the time I was done, I had a list long enough to fill a notebook. The day of the confrontation arrived. I waited until Kevin and Amber were both in the living room, chatting as if everything was perfectly normal. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. We need to talk, I said, stepping into the room. My voice was steady, even as my hands trembled at my sides. Kevin glanced up, surprised by my tone. What's this about, Sophia? I didn't mince words. It's about your parents, Kevin. Their constant interference, their disrespect for my boundaries, it ends today. I held up the list I had prepared, my resolve unwavering. Amber scoffed, crossing her arms. This is ridiculous. We're just trying to help. Help, I said, my voice rising. By undermining me at every turn? By treating me like I don't matter in my own home? Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly caught off guard by my outburst. Sophia, they're my parents. We can't just kick them out. No, Kevin, I said firmly, locking eyes with him. They're guests in my home, and they've overstayed their welcome. Either they leave or I do. And I'm taking Brian with me. My ultimatum hung heavy in the air. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. I could see the flicker of realization in Kevin's eyes, but it was Amber who broke the silence. You wouldn't dare, she hissed, her facade of control slipping for the first time. Watch me, I shot back, my voice filled with a determination I hadn't felt in years. That night, Kevin's parents packed their bags. Amber shot me a venomous look as she stepped out the door. You'll regret this, Sophia, she said coldly. But as the door closed behind them, I felt an enormous weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. It was a small victory, but it was mine, and it was enough to keep me going. In the days that followed, the house was eerily quiet. Kevin's demeanor had shifted. He was cold and distant, his interactions with me minimal and strained. I threw myself into the joy of spending time with Brian, finding solace in his laughter and the peace of my reclaimed home. One evening, as Brian played with his toys on the living room floor, Kevin walked in with an announcement. I've got to go on a business trip, he said flatly. I'll be gone for a few weeks. Fine, I replied curtly, not bothering to look up from the book I was reading. I didn't try to hide the relief I felt at the thought of his absence. After Kevin left, the house felt different, freer, lighter. I began undoing all the changes Amber had made, one by one. Rearranging the kitchen to the way I liked it, restoring Brian's room to its original setup. Each small task felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But the true turning point came when I stumbled upon something I hadn't been looking for. One afternoon, as I tidied up the living room, I noticed Kevin's laptop sitting on the coffee table. He had carelessly left it open, and a series of emails caught my eye. Curiosity turned to shock as I read the words on the screen. The emails detailed an affair, an ongoing betrayal that cut deeper than any of his mother's insults ever could. Anger, hurt, and a profound sense of betrayal churned within me, threatening to overwhelm me. But instead of breaking down, I felt a strange sense of clarity. It was time for Kevin to face the consequences of his actions. I knew I couldn't move forward without a plan. This time, every step had to be deliberate, calculated, and focused on ensuring my son and I would never again be subjected to the manipulation and betrayal Kevin and his family had inflicted upon us. The first step was clear. I needed to protect myself legally and financially. The morning after Kevin's departure, I made a call to a lawyer. Sitting across from her in the quiet office, I laid everything bare. Kevin's neglect, the emotional abuse from his family, and, most damning of all, the affair I had uncovered. She listened intently, her expression a mix of professionalism and sympathy. We'll start by filing for divorce, she said firmly. This will ensure your interests and Brian's are protected. Hearing those words made it real. There was no going back now. What about the house? I asked. It was left to me by my grandparents, but I want to sell it. I don't want any ties to this place when he returns. The lawyer nodded. It's your property, Sophia. You can sell it, and you don't need his permission. I left her office feeling a newfound sense of control. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking charge of my life. I contacted a real estate agent that same day. I need to sell my house quickly and quietly, I told her, my voice steady but urgent. The agent looked at me in surprise. Are you sure about this, Sophia? This is a big decision. I met her gaze with unwavering resolve. I've never been more sure of anything, I replied, my words carrying the weight of betrayal and the strength I was slowly reclaiming. Within days, the house was listed, and offers began to pour in. It all happened so quickly that I barely had time to process it, but each step brought a strange sense of relief. The thought of Kevin returning to find his sense of control stripped away gave me a bitter kind of satisfaction. During this time, I leaned heavily on my family. My parents were appalled when I told them the full extent of what had been happening. You don't have to face this alone, my father said, his voice steady and reassuring. My mother added, we're here for you and Brian, always. Their support was like a lifeline. Watching Brian play in their warm, welcoming home, laughing without a care in the world, I made a silent vow to protect his happiness at all costs. As Kevin's return loomed closer, I felt the tension in me grow. I had rehearsed the confrontation in my mind countless times, imagining every possible scenario. Still, when the day finally arrived, my heart raced as I heard his key turn in the lock. Sophia, I'm home, Kevin called out, his voice echoing through what was now an unfamiliar space. I stepped out of the kitchen, my posture rigid and my expression unreadable. Welcome back, Kevin. We need to talk. He paused, looking around the room. His brows furrowed. What's going on? The house looks different. I didn't flinch. That's because I sold it, Kevin. It's no longer ours. His face contorted with disbelief. You did what? You can't just sell our house without telling me. It's my house, Kevin, I said, my voice calm but firm. And after what I discovered, I don't think you have a say in it anymore. He scoffed, attempting to regain his composure. What are you talking about? I looked him in the eye, refusing to back down. The affair, Kevin. I know everything. His confident facade crumbled in an instant. Sophia, it's not what you think, he stammered, his voice faltering. No, I interrupted. I think it's exactly what it looks like. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. He shifted uneasily, his tone turning defensive. You're overreacting. We can work through this. There's no we anymore, Kevin, I said, pulling out the divorce papers and placing them on the table. I filed for divorce. For a moment, he just stared at the papers, his disbelief turning into anger. The ensuing conversation was a blur of accusations and weak justifications, but I stood my ground. The man I had once loved was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized, a stranger driven by selfishness and deceit. Finally, he stormed out, vowing to fight the divorce. But as the door slammed shut behind him, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of changes. The house sold quickly, and I moved in with my parents while I finalized the next steps. Kevin's parents, once so imposing and confident, tried to contact me, but I refused to engage. I had severed all ties with them. On the day of the court hearing, Kevin looked defeated. He sat across from me in the courtroom, his once arrogant demeanor replaced by a weariness that hinted at the weight of his actions finally sinking in. As the judge granted the divorce and awarded me full custody of Brian, I felt a sense of justice wash over me. After the hearing, Kevin tried to approach me one last time. Sophia, please. We can fix this. I'll do better. I promise. I shook my head, my voice steady and resolute. You made your choice, Kevin. Now live with it. Without another word, I turned and walked away, holding Brian's hand tightly in mine. The news of our divorce and Kevin's affair spread quickly, tarnishing his reputation and straining his relationships. His parents, once so proud and judgmental, were now shunned by the same community that had once admired them. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and hope. It wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the start of something new. Brian and I had a future to build, free from deceit and manipulation. Life after the divorce felt like stepping into the sunlight after being trapped in a dark tunnel. The house was gone, but so were the burdens tied to it. I had regained control, not just of my home, but of my life. Brian thrived in the love and stability I worked hard to provide, his laughter a constant reminder of what I was fighting for. And as I watched him play, I realized that no matter how uncertain the future seemed, it was ours to shape together. My days were busy, but fulfilling. Every moment was spent rebuilding my life, nurturing Brian, and managing the coffee shop that had become my sanctuary. The warm smell of freshly brewed coffee and the chatter of customers filled my days with a sense of purpose. It was a small but significant escape from the chaos of the past. Yet, the shadow of Kevin and his family lingered. Though I had closed that chapter of my life, the scars they left behind occasionally resurfaced, reminding me of the journey I had endured. One evening, as I was locking up the shop, I turned to see a figure standing near the doorway. My heart sank when I recognized Kevin. He looked disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and his face etched with exhaustion. This wasn't the composed and confident man I had once known. He seemed smaller, broken even. "Sophia," he said, his voice pleading. "Please, I need to talk to you." I hesitated, my hand tightening on the keys. Seeing him stirred a mix of emotions, pity, anger, and a faint echo of what I used to feel for him. But those days were gone. "What do you want, Kevin?" I asked, my tone colder than I intended. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "It's about the alimony and child support," he began, his voice laced with embarrassment. I can't afford it. My job, I lost it because of the scandal. And my parents, they're broke too." His words hit me like a cold splash of reality. For a moment, I felt the faintest twinge of pity, but it was quickly overtaken by the weight of his betrayal. "That's not my problem, Kevin," I said firmly. "You made your choices, and now you have to deal with the consequences." "Sophia, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I have nothing left. I'm begging you, for old time's sake." The phrase "old time's sake" twisted something inside me. Memories of better days, days when I thought we were building a future together, flashed through my mind. But those memories were overshadowed by the pain and lies that had unraveled everything. "Old time's sake?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "Those times are gone, Kevin. You should have thought about the consequences before you cheated and lied." I turned to leave, determined not to let him pull me back into his chaos. But then, his next words stopped me in my tracks. "I'm sorry, Sophia," he said softly. "Truly, I am. I was a fool, and I ruined everything. Please, help me." For a brief moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I had once loved. Vulnerable, regretful, and desperate. It was the first time I had ever seen him this way, completely stripped of his pride. But the pain he had caused ran too deep. The betrayal was still raw, and I had worked too hard to rebuild myself to risk falling back into the trap of his manipulations. "I'm sorry, Kevin," I said, my voice steady. "But I can't help you. You need to figure this out on your own." His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. But instead, he just nodded, his eyes filled with a sorrow I hadn't seen before. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone outside the shop. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I felt a sense of closure. For years, I had carried the weight of his betrayal and the damage it had caused to my life. But now, I felt lighter, as if that burden had finally been lifted. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and moments of doubt. But it had also led me to a place of strength and independence that I never thought I'd find. Life moved forward as it always does. Brian grew quickly, his laughter filling our home with joy. He was curious about everything, his boundless energy a constant reminder of what I was fighting for. The coffee shop flourished, becoming more than just a business. It was a hub of warmth and community. Regulars came in not just for the coffee, but for the sense of belonging the shop offered. It became a place where I felt at home, surrounded by support and kindness. As for me, I found solace in the simple pleasures of life. The smell of fresh coffee brewing in the morning, the sound of Brian's giggles as he played, the quiet moments spent reading a book or enjoying a sunset. These small joys became the foundation of my new life. Kevin and his parents became distant memories. Their once dominating presence had faded into the background, reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale of what happens when selfishness and betrayal take precedence over love and trust. One evening, as I locked up the shop and stepped outside, I paused to look up at the sky. The hues of orange and pink signaled the end of another day. Brian's small hand slipped into mine, and I smiled down at him, his innocent face glowing with happiness. Our future was uncertain, but it was ours to shape. I had no doubt that challenges lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them. Together, Brian and I were moving forward, one step at a time, into a new chapter of our lives. And this time, I knew we were going to be okay. The bank's fraud alert message flashed on my phone screen while I was in the middle of preparing closing arguments for tomorrow's case. $150,000. Transferred out. My stomach dropped as if I'd missed a step going downstairs. I'm Penny, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I had my life perfectly arranged. The kind of order that comes from 15 years of meticulous planning and calculated decisions. The kind that lets you sleep at night knowing tomorrow won't bring any surprises. Miss Carter. The bank representative's voice crackled through my phone. Are you still there? Yes. My fingers trembled as I pulled up my banking app. When was this transfer made? Yesterday at 3:42 p.m. The funds were moved to an account under the name Lucas Bennett. Lucas. My fiancé. The man who'd spent last night planning our honeymoon while I dozed off on his shoulder. That's impossible, I said, but the words felt hollow. I never authorized. The transfer was authenticated using your security credentials, Miss Carter. The leather of my office chair creaked as I leaned back, my eyes fixed on the framed photo of Lucas and me at his family's summer house. His mother Eleanor's perfectly manicured garden in the background, his father Richard's arm around my shoulder. One big happy family. I need you to freeze the account immediately, I said, my lawyer voice taking over. And I want all transaction records from the past month. Of course, Miss Carter. We'll begin our investigation right away. After hanging up, I called Lucas. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Darling, don't forget dinner tonight. 7 sharp. We're celebrating Richard's new investment venture. I stared at the message until the words blurred. The Bennetts and their endless celebrations, their champagne toasts to success that always seemed just around the corner. How had I never noticed the desperation beneath their polished smiles? Another call to Lucas. Voicemail again. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the prenuptial agreement I'd been drafting. The one I hadn't shown Lucas yet. The one that would have protected my assets, including that $150,000 I'd been saving since my first year of law school. My office phone rang. It was Megan, my best friend from the DA's office. Penny, you need to see this, she said without preamble. I'm sending you a link. It's about the Bennetts. The email notification popped up as she spoke. I clicked the link, and there it was, a local news article about Richard Bennett's investment firm. The words investigation and fraud jumped out at me like neon signs. I closed the browser and reached for my car keys. The Bennetts wanted dinner at 7? Fine. I'd be there. But first, I had some questions for my fiancé. The Bennett estate loomed before me, its perfectly trimmed hedges and manicured lawn a monument to appearances. I gripped my steering wheel, rehearsing the questions I needed answered, but Lucas's car wasn't in the circular driveway. Of course not. Eleanor opened the door before I could knock, champagne flute in hand. Darling, you're early. Come help me finish the table arrangements. I followed her through the marble foyer, past the Ming vases that probably cost more than my annual salary. The dining room sparkled with crystal and silver, elaborate flower arrangements dotting the massive table. Richard's closing a magnificent deal, Eleanor said, adjusting a place card. Australian mining interests. Simply revolutionary. Where's Lucas? I kept my voice steady, casual. Oh, he and Nathan had some last-minute business to handle. They'll join us shortly. She paused, studying my face. Is everything all right, dear? You look tense. Before I could respond, Richard's booming voice filled the room. If it isn't my favorite future daughter-in-law. He swept in, cologne and confidence preceding him. Have you heard about our latest venture? Actually, I did see something interesting today. I met his gaze. An article about your firm. The champagne flute in Eleanor's hand trembled slightly. Richard's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. You can't believe everything you read, he said, loosening his tie. Jealous competitors spreading rumors. Nothing more. Eleanor touched my arm. Penny, dear, would you help me in the kitchen? These soufflés are so temperamental. In the kitchen, she busied herself with dishes that didn't need attention. You know how these things go, darling. Business can be so complex. Like transferring money without authorization? The words slipped out before I could stop them. She froze, then slowly turned. I don't know what you mean. $150,000, Eleanor. From my account to Lucas's. Yesterday, the kitchen door swung open. Nathan stumbled in, his designer suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. Mom, I need to talk to you about. He stopped short when he saw me. Nathan, Eleanor's voice sharpened. Where's your brother? He's handling something. Nathan's hands shook as he reached for the decanter of whiskey on the counter. Eleanor intercepted him. Not now. Go clean up before dinner. I watched this exchange, pieces clicking into place. The article. The missing money. Nathan's trembling hands. Lucas's absence. I think I said quietly, we all need to have a very different kind of conversation tonight. Richard appeared in the doorway, his phone pressed to his ear. The transfer didn't clear? What do you mean it's frozen? His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw real fear there. The doorbell rang. Through the foyer windows, I caught a glimpse of familiar faces, police officers in suits, badges glinting in the evening light. Eleanor's champagne flute shattered on the marble floor. I sat across from Lucas in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the police station, watching him stir his untouched latte. The same hands that had stolen my savings now fidgeted with a wooden stirrer, splitting it into tiny pieces. Nathan's gambling debts, he said finally. They were going to kill him, Penny. So you decided to kill my trust instead? His eyes met mine, those same eyes that had once made me believe in fairy tales. Dad's investments went south. Everything's leveraged. The house, the cars. When Nathan came to me. Stop. I pushed my coffee aside. You had choices, Lucas. You could have told me the truth. Could I? His voice cracked. You're all about rules, structure. Your perfect little world where everything fits into neat categories of right and wrong. The barista called out another order, the steam wand screaming. I thought about Eleanor's face when the police arrived, how quickly her sophistication had crumbled into desperate pleading. They're questioning Richard right now, I said. About the firm's finances. Lucas leaned forward. You have to help us. You're a lawyer. There must be something. Like what? Helping you hide more fraud? Lying to investigators. My engagement ring caught the light, mocking me. How long have you been covering for them? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Megan. Check your email. Found something about Nathan's casino visits. You don't understand family loyalty, Lucas said, his voice hardening. Everything I did was to protect them. And what about protecting me? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Your mother called me this morning, asking if I could loan them another $50,000. She actually thought. Mom's desperate. We all are. He grabbed my wrist. Just give us time to sort this out. Please. I pulled away, but not before noticing the designer watch on his wrist, new, expensive. Bought with my money? Your father's firm is under federal investigation. Nathan's being questioned about money laundering. And you. I slipped off my engagement ring and placed it on the table. You're still lying to me. Penny, wait. I found the offshore account, Lucas. The one in the Caymans. Want to explain that? His face went pale. Behind him, through the cafe window, I saw Eleanor's Mercedes pull up. She stepped out, perfectly coiffed despite everything, her red-soled shoes clicking on the sidewalk. Mother's here to help with damage control? I asked, reaching for my phone. Good timing. Because I just forwarded some very interesting documents to the FBI. The bell above the door chimed as Eleanor entered, her smile brittle as winter ice. Eleanor's heels clicked across my office floor like a metronome counting down to disaster. She placed a manila envelope on my desk, her manicured nails tapping the surface twice. "You're making a terrible mistake, dear," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Family protects family." "I'm not family." I left the envelope untouched. "And I'm done being manipulated." "No." She tilted her head. "Then why did Lucas give you access to those offshore accounts last month?" My hand froze over my coffee mug. "What?" "Your signature is all over the transfer documents. Digital signatures, but still." She smiled, all teeth and threat. "Richard may be facing charges, but you're implicated too." My phone buzzed, Megan again. I ignored it, focusing on Eleanor's perfect composure, searching for cracks. "You forged my signatures." "Prove it." She opened the envelope, spreading papers across my desk. "Your law firm's reputation, your career, everything you've built. Are you ready to lose it all over principle?" Another buzz, then another. I glanced at my phone. 3 missed calls from Lucas, 2 from Nathan. A text from an unknown number. "Need to talk about the Bennetts." "Vanessa, what do you want?" I asked Eleanor. "Drop the FBI tip. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." She leaned forward. "Help us fix this and everyone wins." My office door opened. Megan stood there, face grim. "Penny, turn on the news." "Now." I reached for my remote. The screen flickered to life. Richard Bennett in handcuffs, being led from his office. The crawler beneath showed numbers, millions missing, investors ruined, lives destroyed. "Mother." Lucas appeared in my doorway, tie loose, face ashen. "They're freezing everything. All the accounts." Eleanor's composure cracked. "Even everything." I watched them, these people who'd almost become my family, their carefully constructed world crumbling. My phone buzzed again. That unknown number. "You should take that," Eleanor said quietly. Vanessa always did have impeccable timing. I stared at her. "You know, everyone's secrets eventually come out, dear." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "The question is, whose secrets will destroy more lives?" Lucas moved toward my desk. "Penny, please." "Don't." I held up my hand, remembering his new watch, the offshore accounts, the forged signatures. "Just don't." My phone buzzed one final time. A text from Megan. "Found proof of who really accessed your accounts. You need to see this." I looked at the Bennetts, Eleanor's calculated calm, Lucas's desperate eyes, and made my decision. Sometimes burning bridges lights the way forward. "Get out," I said, reaching for my phone. "All of you." The cafe where I met Vanessa was nothing like the Bennetts' usual haunts, no crystal chandeliers or imported marble. Just cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like regret. She stirred her untouched cup, her red nails chipped and worn, so different from Eleanor's perfect manicure. "They did the same thing to me 5 years ago," she said, sliding a worn leather portfolio across the table. "Different scheme, same players." Inside were bank statements, letters, photos, a paper trail of destruction. My hands trembled as I recognized Eleanor's signature style, the careful manipulation, the gradual isolation of targets. Lucas knew. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Lucas orchestrated it. Vanessa's laugh was bitter as black coffee. "He's the architect, Penny." Eleanor provides the charm, Richard the connections, Nathan the convenient excuse. But Lucas? He plans everything. My phone lit up with his name again. 7th call today. "There's more," Vanessa said, pulling out another envelope. "Remember the Cayman transfers? Look at the dates." The timestamps showed transfers going back 3 years, long before I'd met Lucas. My name appeared on documents I'd never seen, my signature forged with practiced precision. "They're setting you up as the fall guy," she said quietly. "Just like they did with me." The cafe door chimed. Nathan stumbled in, looking worse than at the family dinner. His eyes found us, widened with recognition. "You shouldn't be here," he slurred, gripping the back of an empty chair. "Lucas is going to." "Going to what?" I stood, anger finally overtaking shock. Steal more of my money? Forge more signatures? You don't understand, Nathan's voice cracked. He's not who you think. Neither are you. Vanessa's words cut like ice. Tell her about Monaco, Nathan. Tell her what happened to the last person who threatened to expose your family. Nathan's face went ash-white. He backed away, nearly knocking over a waitress. My phone buzzed again. Megan, this time, FBI wants to meet. They have questions about your involvement. They'll destroy you, Vanessa said, watching Nathan flee. Unless you destroy them first. I looked down at the evidence spread before me, the elaborate web of lies, the carefully constructed trap I'd walked into. Everything I'd believed about Lucas, about our future, was as fake as the signatures on those documents. Why are you helping me? I asked Vanessa. She gathered the papers, her movements deliberate. Because someone finally needs to break the Bennett family's pattern. And you. She met my eyes. You're angry enough to do it. My phone lit up one last time, a text from Lucas. I can explain everything. Please don't do anything rash. I smiled, thinking of Eleanor's threats, Richard's handcuffs, Nathan's fear. You're right, I told Vanessa. I am. The Bennett estate looked different in the rain, its grandeur washed away to reveal hairline cracks in the facade. I walked past Eleanor's prized roses, clutching Vanessa's portfolio like a shield, and rang the doorbell. Lucas opened the door. You came. Family meeting, right? That's what you called it. I stepped inside, water dripping onto imported marble. Where's everyone? Study. His hand moved toward my arm but stopped short. Penny, before we go in. Save it. The study door opened to Richard behind his mahogany desk, Eleanor perched beside him like a bird of prey. Nathan slumped in a corner chair, avoiding everyone's eyes. The perfect family tableau, waiting for their latest victim. Darling, Eleanor started, we can explain. I dropped the portfolio on Richard's desk. Documents spilled out, bank statements, forged signatures, offshore accounts. Monaco, I said. Want to tell me about Monaco, Richard? The color drained from his face. Behind me, Lucas inhaled sharply. That's ancient history, Eleanor cut in. Irrelevant. Like Vanessa was irrelevant? I turned to Lucas. Or did you think I wouldn't find out about that either? Nathan stood suddenly. We should tell her. Shut up, Lucas snapped. No. I pulled out my phone, opened my recording app. Let him talk. Eleanor rose, all pretense of warmth gone. Think carefully about what you're doing, Penelope. Your name is on those documents too. Because you put it there. I met her gaze. But here's what you didn't know, I've been recording everything. Every conversation, every threat, every admission. Lucas moved toward me. You're bluffing. Check your brother's phone. I smiled as Nathan paled further. He's been quite chatty lately. Especially about Monaco. Richard slammed his hand on the desk. Enough. You think you can threaten us? We built this family on lies. I played the recording of Nathan's confession from the cafe. Or just theft and forgery? The study door burst open. FBI agents poured in, badges glinting. I stepped back, watching the scene unfold, Richard's protests, Eleanor's composed mask cracking, Nathan's relief. Lucas grabbed my arm. You don't understand what you've done. I understand perfectly. I pulled free. You taught me well. Family protects family, right? As handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, I saw something I'd never seen before in Lucas's eyes, fear. Miss Carter, an agent called, will need your statement. I walked out of the study, past the family portraits, past the life I'd almost had. My phone buzzed, Vanessa, is it done? I looked back at the Bennett family's empire crumbling behind me. Yes, I typed. It's done. But something in Lucas's eyes haunted me. Maybe Eleanor was right. I didn't understand what I'd done. Not yet. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Lucas sat across from me, prison jumpsuit replacing his tailored suits, but his eyes still held that calculating gleam. You don't have the whole story, he said, leaning forward. About Monaco. About Vanessa. I have enough. I placed a manila envelope on the table between us. But you're going to give me the rest. He smiled, That same smile that had once made me believe in forever. And why would I do that? Because Eleanor's being charged tomorrow. The FBI found the real ledgers. The smile vanished. You're lying. Nathan talked. All of it. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the accidents that happened to anyone who threatened exposure. I slid the envelope toward him, including what really happened to Vanessa's sister in Monaco. His hands clenched. You've been working with her this whole time. No, Lucas. I've been working with the FBI. Vanessa. I let the silence hang. Vanessa's been dead for 6 months. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. I just saw her sister, twin sister, the one who survived your family's last investment opportunity. I pulled out my phone, showed him the death certificate. She's been playing you, playing all of us, waiting for the right moment. Lucas lunged across the table, but the guards were faster. As they restrained him, papers spilled from the envelope, crime scene photos, bank records. A newspaper clipping about a tragic yacht accident in Monaco. You think you've won? He snarled. You have no idea what you've started. Actually, I do. I stood, gathering the scattered evidence. Your mother confessed everything this morning. About Monaco, about Vanessa, about how you orchestrated all of it. She would never. A mother's love has limits, Lucas. Especially when she discovers her son was planning to frame her for everything. His face contorted. You're just like them. Playing games, manipulating. No. I placed my engagement ring on the table. I'm what you created. You taught me how to destroy someone from the inside out. Consider this my final lesson. As the guards led him away, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Justice served. Thank you, V's sister. I walked out of the prison into bright sunlight, leaving behind the man I'd almost married and the woman I'd almost become. The Bennett family's empire was ashes, their secrets exposed, their power broken. But Lucas was right about one thing: I didn't understand what I'd started. Because revenge, like love, never ends quite the way you expect. The Bennett estate sold at auction on a crisp autumn morning. I watched from my car as strangers carried out Eleanor's precious antiques, Richard's leather-bound books, the family portraits that had witnessed generations of lies. My phone buzzed, a text from Nathan. Thank you. Rehab's working. I'm finally free. Through the wrought iron gates, I spotted Eleanor supervising the removal of her roses. Even now, she maintained her perfect posture, though her designer clothes had been replaced by department store basics. She caught my eye and raised her hand, not quite a wave, not quite a surrender. I drove to the cemetery where a simple headstone read, Vanessa Green, beloved sister. Fresh flowers lay at its base, along with a newspaper clipping about the Bennett family's downfall. A handwritten note fluttered in the breeze. We did it, V. Quite a show you orchestrated, Megan said, appearing beside me. The FBI's still unraveling their schemes. 20 years of fraud, 3 continents, countless victims. And one very patient sister, who disappeared right after the arrests. Megan handed me an envelope. This came for you at the office. Inside was a single photo, Vanessa and her sister on that yacht in Monaco, before everything went wrong. On the back, in familiar handwriting, sometimes revenge is just another word for justice. My phone rang, the prison's number. Lucas, again. I declined the call, remembering his last words in the visiting room. You have no idea what you've started. But he was wrong. I knew exactly what I'd started, the truth. And the truth, once unleashed, had its own kind of revenge. The media's calling it the scandal of the decade, Megan said. Your name's being floated for partner. I pocketed the photo. I'm leaving the firm. What? Opening my own practice, specializing in fraud victims. I smiled at Vanessa's headstone. Someone needs to help people fight back. A sleek black car pulled up to the cemetery gates. Through the tinted windows, I glimpsed a woman who looked exactly like Vanessa. She raised her hand in a subtle salute before the car glided away. Was that, Megan started. Sometimes it's better not to know all the answers. I turned away from the grave. Some secrets deserve to stay buried. My engagement ring sat heavy in my pocket, my last tie to the Bennett legacy. I pulled it out, studying how it caught the light one final time. Then I placed it on Vanessa's headstone, a glittering monument to promises broken and remade. The truth about revenge isn't that it heals you. It's that it transforms you. And sometimes, that transformation is the only justice you need.
Yeah, that's impossible. We live together, after all, Emily said with a smirk. You just have to sign the divorce papers. Good luck living in poverty. With that unilateral phone call ended, I stood dumbfounded. My lawyer, Jake, couldn't hold back his laughter and burst out chuckling. Emily looked at Jake with a puzzled expression as he wiped tears of laughter with a handkerchief. My apologies, Jake managed to say between laughs, but the president is your wife, isn't she? My name is Rose. I've been married to my husband John for 2 years. We don't have children, and both of us are busy with work, even on weekends. We hardly have time to talk leisurely, passing each other by. Despite this, we managed to synchronize our schedules for a yearly overseas trip. When we married, we decided to stretch and purchase an upper-floor apartment in the Bay Area, banking on its future asset value. Thanks to this, we're content with our lives. Emily, a close friend from high school, joined me for lunch one day at a cafe near the park. She's still single and has high standards for men, especially in education and income, often checking dating apps. Despite our differing lives now, we share a deep bond and know each other's romantic histories. After 2 years, Emily finally asked if she could visit my apartment, a place she'd never seen before. On the weekend, Emily arrived, and her amazement was palpable even through the intercom. Wow, this is amazing, she repeated as I opened the door. It's so huge, and that elevator ride took forever. I had chosen this large apartment as a once-in-a-lifetime purchase without any compromises, akin to a spacious detached house. It's truly beautiful, Emily remarked, admiring the high-floor penthouse and luxurious interior design. It must have been expensive. Yes, it's a $6 million apartment with excellent security, I replied. Emily's eyes widened in awe. Your husband must be very wealthy. Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. Can I use your bathroom? She asked abruptly, leaving me momentarily puzzled in the living room. I directed Emily to the bathroom and started preparing tea in the kitchen. Concerned when she took longer than usual, I was just about to check on her when Emily returned. I was in the midst of replying to an email, which wasn't typical for her. A slight discomfort lingered as we enjoyed tea and the cookies Emily had brought. She asked if she could stay until evening, mentioning she wanted to say hi to John. It had been since our wedding that Emily had seen him, so her request seemed natural. I decided to check with John, who readily agreed. Looks like I'll finish work early, he replied in his email. I informed Emily it was fine and began preparing dinner. While I cooked, Emily fiddled with her smartphone before heading back to the bathroom. Unaware of the time passing, I eventually noticed her absence. When Emily returned, I noticed she was wearing a familiar necklace. On closer inspection, I realized it was mine. As I stared at the necklace, Emily flashed an embarrassed smile. How do I look? Does it suit me? She asked, striking a playful pose. Taken aback, I began to express my surprise, but Emily quickly laughed it off. Oh no, I'm just joking. I happened to find it and thought it was cute. It must be very expensive, she continued, almost childlike in her excuse. It's not only costly but also has a premium value. I couldn't help but mention, that's a gift from John. Emily sighed in admiration. Wow, that's impressive to be able to afford something like this. However, the necklace had been stored in our bedroom closet. It dawned on me that Emily, under the guise of using the bathroom, must have ventured into our bedroom and peeked into the closet. I couldn't believe such behavior, but chose not to criticize Emily, feeling it wasn't the right moment. I emphasized the necklace's importance, and seeing that I wasn't criticizing her, Emily started proposing something outrageous. Can I borrow this necklace for a while? I'm meeting a doctor I got to know through a dating app soon, and I want to wear it, she pleaded, clasping her hands together as if praying. Though I felt uneasy about refusing, I reluctantly agreed to lend it. Okay, but please take good care of it. As I said earlier, it's a gift from John. As soon as Emily knew she could borrow it, she started smiling and gently caressing the necklace. It seemed my words didn't quite get through to her. After finishing some preliminary cooking preparations, I pretended to go to the bathroom but actually went to check the bedroom. As expected, the closet and bedside chests weren't properly closed. Emily must have opened every drawer and door. There were fingerprints on my jewelry, watches, and precious metals. Emily had touched them, but apparently, borrowing them didn't cross her mind. Some shoes looked like they had been forcibly worn, their heels deformed. This was clearly going too far. I returned to the living room and confronted Emily. You touched various things in the bedroom, didn't you? The shoes are deformed, and there are fingerprints on the watch. Instead of becoming contrite, Emily puffed her cheeks slightly. Please stop going through my stuff, she replied, returning to her usual expression and apologizing with a sorry. Not wanting to damage our friendship over this, I decided to let it go with a light laugh. Just then, John arrived home, holding a box of cake. It was the first time John and Emily had met since our wedding. Initially awkward, they gradually warmed up to each other, and dinner became lively. By the time we enjoyed the cake John had brought, he and Emily were chatting like old friends. While I cleared the dishes and washed up, they laughed together amiably. Isn't my boss terrible? I wish I had a boss like you, John said with a grin, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Ha ha ha, he chuckled. Emily's casual touches towards John bothered me, but I reasoned it was better than them being distant. Looking back, I realized I was naively thinking that way. After all, John wasn't Emily's type. About a month after Emily's visit, John's behavior began to change. He started spending more time on his smartphone, something he hadn't done much before. During our conversations, John often seemed distracted, asking me to repeat myself several times. His smartphone was always within reach, even in the toilet or bathroom. The change was obvious, and I began to feel like a cheated wife. I briefly considered checking John's phone but hesitated to invade his privacy. Conversations between us at home dwindled, and John started working excessively on weekends, something rare before. Originally, we barely saw each other on weekdays, and now weekends felt the same, almost like living separately. To make matters worse, John and I began sleeping in separate rooms under the pretext of being tired. As thoughts of divorce or separation lingered vaguely in my mind, I stumbled upon divorce papers on the living room table one day. Upon closer inspection, I noticed John had already signed them. Shaken by the reality of the situation, despite having considered it a possibility, I called John with trembling hands. Just got home and found divorce papers on the table. What does this mean? I asked, my voice quivering. It means just that. I want to divorce you, John replied bluntly. Wanting to understand, I pressed John for an explanation. According to him, I've found someone. I love you. This isn't just an affair. I'm serious about it. John's words sounded like a fantasy, but it was nothing more than an affair. Then I heard a familiar female voice over the phone. It was Emily's voice. As I had suspected, it confirmed my fears. I'm dating John, and I'm thinking about marrying him. Emily's voice over the phone quickened my heartbeat and brought on an unpleasant sweat. Although I had suspected it, having it confirmed like this was unsettling. When I met John at your house, it was love at first sight, Emily continued casually. We exchanged contact information and started messaging. Gradually, it led to, Emily's manner of speaking had become crude. Maybe this was her true nature. John says there's nothing left to talk about. Can you just sign the divorce papers and send them off quickly? I want to move forward, Emily demanded. Tell John to come back home. Yeah, that's impossible. We're living together. You just have to sign the divorce papers. Good luck going back to living in poverty, I replied before ending the call. I stood dumbfounded for a while, holding the phone after the one-sided conversation ended. Many sleepless nights followed. John didn't come back home, and I couldn't bring myself to touch the divorce papers left on the living room table. They just sat there, untouched. Moreover, Emily sent me several photos of her and John together, flaunting their relationship. It was clear they were close, but I couldn't understand why they were treating me like this. My mental health deteriorated. I looked pale and sometimes felt vacant even during the day. Concerned friends suggested I see a therapist, and I reluctantly started taking medication, which helped me regain some peace and improved my sleep. I managed to go to work, but then an unbelievable incident occurred. When I returned home from the hospital, something felt off inside the room. When I checked the bedroom closet, bags and jewelry were missing. The count of jewelry and watches in the chest was off too. There was only one person who could do this. Why would she go this far? What had I ever done to deserve this? My insomnia returned, and I spent my days dazed and sleepless. During counseling at therapy, I mentioned the theft at home, and they strongly advised me to consult a lawyer. I contacted the company's lawyer, Jake, and arranged a meeting. The first thing Jake asked during our meeting was, "What would you like to do?" "I'll get a divorce. I want those two to face proper consequences," I answered immediately. I was surprised at myself. Just a short while ago, I was wondering what to do. It came out so easily from my mouth. Perhaps deep down, I did want to punish them after being tormented so one-sidedly. It felt fair to fight back. A week later, I received a call from Emily. I had sent her a certified mail. "Hey, what are you thinking? Sending a certified mail to my office?" Emily sounded furious, her voice filled with rage. "You should have expected at least this much for what you've done. Anyway, I've left everything to my lawyer now." I hung up the phone. Emily tried calling several times after that, but I ignored all her calls. Then, I received a call from John. I had sent a certified mail to his parents' home. Apparently, the affair had caused a huge uproar at his home. I wanted to laugh at his self-inflicted troubles but restrained myself. Not feeling satisfied with just leaving it to Jake, I decided to meet them. I wanted to confront them thoroughly. Jake arranged a meeting at his office a few days later. They reluctantly showed up at Jake's office. I expected them to bring their own lawyer, but they came alone. Emily burst through the office door roughly, John following, looking uncomfortable. "Finally, I get to meet you, you coward." Emily didn't hide her indignation, but John stepped forward to try and stop her. "Because of you always running away, our wedding keeps getting delayed." Emily seemed ready to throw her bag at me any moment, while John struggled to hold her back. I watched them with a pitiable feeling. Jake nodded at me slightly. "Please stay calm. Any violence or abusive language will result in immediate police notification." Emily stiffened at the mention of the police, and with Jake's intervention, both Emily and John calmed down and took their seats across the office table. The discussion began. "John, you were seeking a divorce, correct?" Jake started. Emily sat arrogantly while John slouched, looking diminished. "We agreed to the divorce. However, given the affair, we will claim damages. Do you have any objections?" John's face clouded over. "I'll agree to the divorce. Just don't contact us after paying the compensation." I quietly nodded in agreement. Emily looked displeased, perhaps expecting more resistance from me. As Jake started discussing the alimony amount, Emily snapped. "I said any amount is fine. We have more money than we know what to do with." She crossed her arms arrogantly. Jake looked at her with interest. "Oh yes, don't you know? John is the president of a jewelry company with an annual turnover of $67.6 million. John looked up, flustered, and tried to restrain Emily's arm. Her face flushed with excitement as she continued. "Damages for an affair are nothing to us. I'll even give you a fair share of the property." John desperately tried to calm Emily, but she shook off his hand and kept talking. "Your salary must be barely enough to live on, right?" Emily laughed. Jake couldn't contain his laughter and burst out laughing. Emily looked at Jake with a puzzled expression as he wiped tears with a handkerchief. "The president is actually this lady right here," Jake managed to say between laughs. Emily, unable to comprehend, gaped open-mouthed. John hung his head, his body trembling slightly. "John is just an employee without any title at the company. I am Rose's company's legal counsel," Jake asserted. Upon hearing this, Emily burst into laughter. "What are you talking about? Are you really a lawyer? Is it okay for lawyers to lie?" she taunted. Jake replied calmly, "Why not ask JN himself whether what I said is true or not?" JN, meanwhile, was biting his lip, looking down. Emily, perhaps feeling uneasy, grabbed John's arms and started shaking him. "You said you were the president of a jewelry company with a turnover of $. Emily began, her grip tightening on John's arms as she became more frantic. "Answer me, it's not a lie, right?" In a faint, hoarse voice, JN whispered, "I'm sorry." The room fell into a deep silence at his admission. Emily's hands, which had been gripping John tightly, fell limply. "You said you were the president," Emily murmured to herself in disbelief. JN's single apology plunged Emily into despair. Trembling, she stood up abruptly. "This is all a lie. There's no way you're the president," Emily accused me, pointing a finger. "Why didn't I know about this? After all, we shared everything. Just because we're best friends doesn't mean I share everything, especially with you. We're so obsessed with money." I replied calmly, meeting Emily's gaze directly without averting my eyes. Emily slumped down as if all her strength had left her. "Then what about that house?" she asked weakly. Of course, the house is in my name, so John will be the one leaving, I stated firmly. Emily fell silent, and John kept his head in his hands. John probably didn't want to come here. He knew this would happen, I continued evenly. But not coming would have been worse. Whether he came or not, this was inevitable. Now, Jake interjected, let's begin to disclose the evidence. I had gathered the photos first, John and Emily together, the ones she had sent to my phone. Jake placed an IC recorder on the table and played the recorded conversation. Why would you send me something like this? I was just sharing a bit of our happiness with you. Emily's voice played through the recorder. John seemed to be holding back tears. Are you still clinging to him? I just want the divorce done quickly. I know what you're clinging to, John's income. He's the president of a jewelry company with a turnover of $67.6 million, right? You hid it because you thought I might take it, right? Emily's voice was laced with accusation. Emily, embarrassed, covered her face with her hands. Hurry up and divorce. Leave that tower, man. It'll soon be mine. Too bad JN didn't come back. I'll give you as much alimony as you want, you poor thing. Your aim was not John but his money. I'm speechless at how John was deceived by that. John looked down, tears staining his pants. Emily and John fell silent. Do you really think this is the end? What else could there be? Jake's calm demeanor brought a sense of relief. John looked surprised. It seemed he didn't know anything about it. Hey, what's this about stealing? John asked, confused. Emily bit her lower lip and trembled. No, it wasn't me. I don't know anything about it. Jake placed an iPad on the table and played a video. The footage showed Emily sneaking into the bedroom, taking bags, jewelry, and other expensive items, stuffing them into her bag. Emily stared wide-eyed at the video. What's this? Why did you film this? Isn't this an invasion of privacy? Emily protested. John covered his face with his hands and sighed. Our house has surveillance cameras installed. Why didn't you tell me that earlier? I never thought you'd come to steal. This foolish exchange is giving me a headache, I added, feeling exasperated. And you used my keys without permission. I wanted them. Besides, it's your fault for not buying them for me. The two started arguing, ignoring Jake and me, leaving us dumbfounded. Please save the argument for later. Regarding this theft, we will file a report with the police, Jake interjected calmly. The police? Isn't that a bit much? I just borrowed my friend's things. I never said anything about lending those items to you, I replied calmly. Besides, you're not a friend or anything like that, you were just a classmate. So, I will be filing a police report. Emily's attitude shifted to resignation. Don't say that. I'll compensate, I promise. Just please no police. She began to kneel and apologize. Looking down at Emily coldly, I stated, you're going to compensate. The items you stole are worth more than your annual salary. Are you sure you can handle that? Emily was speechless. And that's not even including the damages, I added. Emily turned to John pleadingly, tears in her voice. Hey, they'll pay for me, right? Even if you're not a president, you make money. John nodded silently. He can't pay for you. He's about to be fired, I said bluntly. John looked shocked and turned his face towards me. Indeed, John hasn't been to work since leaving the house. Plus, with this commotion, there have been complaints from his superiors. But what about the property division? I'll pay with that, Emily interjected. That's not possible, Jake interjected. Rose and John have a prenuptial agreement regarding their assets. You haven't heard anything from John, have you? He never told you the inconvenient truths. I looked at John with disdain. Jake placed the contract on the table. The contract states that if the marriage lasts less than 3 years, neither party is entitled to claim assets from the other. You are currently in the 2nd year of marriage. Emily tried to grab and tear up the document. That document is a notarized deed, so you should handle it carefully. Tampering with it could be criminal, Jake cautioned. John, looking defeated, muttered, but what about the debts? You have savings, right? Use that to pay, Emily urged John desperately. I don't have savings. It seems there are some debts from less reputable sources, John admitted, his voice heavy with resignation. Emily slumped her shoulders in defeat. Her previously glamorous demeanor had vanished. It was her own doing. She got what she deserved. I thought to myself, watching them both exhaustedly muttering, this wasn't supposed to happen, and what do we do now? Deciding to leave the rest to Jake, I stood up. Emily, money isn't something you steal from others. It's something you earn through effort. The divorce was finalized without issue. John's belongings were packed and sent back to his parents' home. John's parents repeatedly apologized and even sent a letter of apology. Emily was investigated by the police for illegal entry and theft. My filing of the police report led to an investigation, and Emily was arrested after admitting to her crimes. Half of the stolen items had been sold, but the rest were returned. Despite the severity, her expression of remorse and willingness to compensate suggested a suspended sentence. However, Emily had other crimes. She was found to have been stealing from men she met through a dating app. This led to a likely prison sentence. Emily's overreaction to the mention of the police and crime now made sense. John, unable to live in Emily's apartment, moved to an old apartment in the suburbs. He struggled to find work due to his unexplained absence and poor work attitude from his previous job, currently making ends meet with day labor. I continued to receive regular updates about their whereabouts from Jake. After the divorce, I focused more on work. Currently, I'm working on expanding our company's jewelry distribution to Europe. The idea came during a long vacation to Europe, a ritual to shake off the bad luck after my divorce. I had the opportunity to connect with the owner of a jewelry shop in France over wine. We hit it off, and he agreed to display my company's jewelry in his shop. The owner, perhaps understanding the pain in my heart for my divorce, is a wonderful man. To be honest, I've been focusing on sales in France because I wanted to see him. It might be mixing business with pleasure, but after all I've been through, I think I deserve this perk.
That's why I asked you to pay back the money you owe, I said, my voice shaking. My husband suddenly left me with a big debt and vanished. I tried to reach him, but he didn't respond. What should I do now? I can't afford to pay off such a huge debt on my own. Thankfully, my daughter, Kate, was there to support me when I felt lost. Mom, don't worry, she said, her voice calm and reassuring. I'm here for you. Kate, 35 years old, worked part-time and took care of the house. Her father, Rogan, and I had a daughter, Rhea. Rogan and I met at a social event. I was feeling nervous, but he approached me and made me feel comfortable. We hit it off and exchanged contact details. As we kept talking, I started feeling something special for Rogan. Soon enough, we began dating. Who would have guessed I'd end up dating someone I met at a mixer? After our first date, I told my older sister, Talia, about Rogan. She burst into laughter, saying, "Really? I never imagined you'd find a boyfriend at a mixer. I thought you'd date someone from work or something." I've always been shy and not great at socializing. Even as an adult, I rarely went to parties. It's quite a surprise, isn't it? You only want to help out, right? Talia asked. Exactly, I replied. When I showed Talia a photo from our date, she said, "He's surprisingly good-looking." After catching up, we said goodbye for the day. Talia is still single and seems content with it, not really interested in getting married or having a boyfriend. While I respect her choice, I'm excited about my future with Rogan. If things go well, and we get married and have kids, that would be wonderful. On my way home, I couldn't help but smile. A few years later, Rogan and I got married. I remember his proposal so clearly. It was such an emotional moment. I couldn't stop crying tears of joy. Moving into our new apartment marked the beginning of our life together as a married couple. We used to live apart, so being with Rogan every day felt like a dream come true. Even though our work schedules were different, we made sure to have dinner together, sleep side by side, and cherish every moment. On days off, we'd relax at home or go for drives, enjoying each other's company. The arrival of our daughter, Rhea, brought even more joy into our lives. She was so tiny and adorable. Her birth was an incredibly emotional experience that I'll never forget. Since Rhea was born, I felt like I found true happiness. Our parents and relatives were thrilled too, sending us lots of gifts to celebrate. Just before Rhea was born, I quit my job to focus on taking care of my family. Rogan has always been supportive, helping with household chores and taking care of Rhea. Even when he's tired, he'd often say, "I'll look after Rhea so you can rest." I'm grateful to have married such a wonderful person like him. Living with Rogan, who loves and cares for us so deeply, has been incredibly heartwarming. However, a few years down the line, I found myself regretting marrying Rogan deeply. Several years after Rhea was born, Rogan surprised me by resigning from his job. He explained that he had been struggling with a new boss, which had taken a toll on his mental health, leading him to quit. While I understood his reasons, I couldn't shake off the feeling of frustration. Why hadn't he discussed this with me beforehand? I thought. Our family relied on his income, so such a significant decision should have been made together. That was unexpected, I said. Have you thought about what's next? Don't worry, I'll figure it out, he replied vaguely. His response didn't ease my concerns, but I had no choice but to trust him. Luckily, Rogan found a new job relatively quickly. That's a relief, I thought. I was about to start working to help out, but with Rhea still young, I want to be there for her. Is everything going well at the new job? I asked. Yeah, it's fine, he replied curtly. I sensed something was off, but I didn't want to push him further, so I handed Rhea to him and went to take a bath. A few days later, Rogan returned home looking downcast. As I tried to inquire about what had happened, memories of his previous abrupt resignation flooded my mind. Could it be that he had quit again so soon? Sadly, my suspicions were confirmed. I quit my job, he admitted. Why? I asked. I just couldn't get along with my coworkers, especially being bossed around by someone much younger, he explained. I understand, I said. But we'll get through this. We'll find another job, and I'll support you however I can. Suddenly, Rogan's demeanor changed, and he lashed out at me. Why do you look so displeased? You only eat because I work. You just stay at home and act all superior, he snapped, tossing his backpack onto the table. Confused by his outburst, I asked, "What's wrong?" Just shut up, he retorted angrily, grabbing a whiskey from the fridge and downing it in one go. I was taken aback by his behavior. I'd never seen him this upset before. I tried to calm him down, but he continued to vent his frustration, eventually slumping onto the sofa in a sullen mood. I was shocked and hurt by his words, and our relationship suffered as a result. Since then, Rogan has been stuck in a cycle of finding and quitting jobs. We went through uncertain times and faced many anxious days. Rogan, can't you take your job more seriously? I asked, trying to be understanding initially, but with everything going on, I couldn't stay silent any longer. You're being unreasonable. If you're unhappy, then you should work and earn money. You rely on me too much. But what about Rhea? What about her? I pleaded. Lately, Rogan seemed to be losing interest in Rhea and avoiding her. When Rhea was born, he was so attentive and happy, but now he was like a different person. No matter how much I pleaded, he showed no interest in finding work. Eventually, I had to leave Rhea with Talia and start working myself. I'm sorry to burden you with this, I told Talia. It's okay, she reassured me. Rhea and I will be fine. Rhea had just started kindergarten, so leaving her with Talia wasn't too concerning. I trusted Talia to take care of her, and Rhea was surprisingly mature and calm for her age. She enjoyed reading newspapers and could write long sentences. Rhea was quiet and composed, and I worried if she would make friends at kindergarten, but she surprised me by making many friends and enjoying her time there. It was heartwarming to see. As a parent, with Rhea settled in kindergarten and Talia looking after her, I felt confident about working outside the home. When I started job hunting, I was surprised to land one quicker than expected, so I began working full-time, and the pay was better than I had hoped for. Even if Rogan didn't have a job, our finances would likely be stable. Luckily, the work environment was pleasant, and despite the busy days, I enjoyed it. After a few years, Rogan finally found a stable job too. It seemed like he had found a workplace that suited him. I felt a huge sense of relief knowing this. Over time, Rogan's mood improved, and he started to resemble the man I married. He became more considerate of my work-life balance, asking if I was tired or if work was tough. I was surprised by his change. Maybe having a stable job gave him peace of mind. Rhea was growing up well, and Rogan became a caring father to her again. Seeing them play together always made me happy. But the thought of quitting my job and returning to the old ways made me anxious, so I continued to rely on Talia for childcare. How's Rhea? Is she doing okay? I asked Talia. Don't worry, she's happily playing, Talia reassured me. As long as Rhea was happy, I felt at ease. I still depended on Talia and had been thinking of treating her to something special to show my gratitude. Several years passed, and Rhea was now in the 3rd grade. She went to school every day with excitement. Our family remained close-knit and loving, just like before. I pondered over what had caused the previous strain between Rogan and me. Our home life now felt stable, as if past issues had been resolved. Then one day, Rogan suggested something unexpected. Have you thought about getting a new car? He asked. A new car? I replied, surprised. Yes, he said. Our current one is reliable, but it's getting old. If it's becoming too costly to maintain. You might be right, I agreed, realizing our car had been with us for a long time and repair expenses were mounting. Maybe it's time for a new one. I thought you'd agree, Rogan said. I've already gathered some catalogs. I didn't expect him to be so enthusiastic about it, but we began looking through the catalogs together. Rhea, come here. Which car do you want to ride in? Let's choose together, Rogan called out to our daughter. The 3 of us enjoyed picking out a car together. Little did I know this day would lead to unexpected events. A few months later, the new car arrived. It was a brand new model, costing over $155,000, and the loan was in my name. Normally, Rogan's name would be on such a loan, but given his job history, we feared rejection. I resolved to work even harder to pay off the loan, and I believed Rogan felt the same way. That's what I thought, but my hopes were crushed in an instant. Rogan stopped coming home, disappearing with the new car we had just bought. Did he get into some kind of trouble? What should I do? Just then, my phone rang. It was Rogan. Rogan, where are you? What's going on? I couldn't hide my concern. Relax, he said. I found someone else. She's more important to me than you. What? What are you saying? I've fallen in love with someone else, he said. I've already started the divorce process. Please don't interfere. Divorce? I can't believe this, I said, stunned by the mention of divorce. But then I remembered a heated argument we had before. Filing for divorce meant we both agreed to end our marriage. I regretted letting my emotions get the best of me then. Oh, and I have a debt you'll have to repay, Rogan added casually. What? How much? Around $200,000, he said. You'll handle the payments with that. He hung up abruptly. I never imagined something like this could happen to me. Were all of his kind gestures just a facade? As these thoughts flooded my mind, I felt my strength drain away. Mom, what's wrong? Rhea asked, rushing to my side with concern as I sank to the floor. It's okay, sweetheart. Thank you, I reassured her, trying to maintain a brave front, even as anxiety gnawed at me. How would I manage with such a huge debt hanging over us? The thought of $200,000 weighed heavily on my mind, and then there was the car loan to worry about too. In a panic, I checked my bank balance, searching every nook and cranny for my ATM card, but it was nowhere to be found. Frantically, I checked my bank app on my phone and was horrified to see a significant decrease in my account balance with no memory of making such withdrawals. Rogan was the only one who could have done this. I tried to reach him, but there was no response. It felt like my world was falling apart. With a blank mind, I resolved to focus on earning money. I decided to keep this burden a secret from Talia and Rhea to spare them unnecessary worry. Weeks later, I collapsed at work due to extreme stress and woke up in a hospital bed, bewildered. Where am I? I asked weakly. Talia entered the room with Rhea, her expression full of concern. It turned out I needed to stay in the hospital for several days for further tests. What should I do? I fretted. I need to discuss Rogan. Once you're discharged, Talia suggested gently. Rhea then confessed that she had overheard Rogan's phone call, surprising me with her knowledge of the situation. As I prepared to leave the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling of apprehension, worried that Talia might reprimand me for letting Ria in on the truth. The next day, I underwent various tests, which revealed that my poor health was due to cancer. Thankfully, it was still in the early stages, and there was hope for recovery through surgery. Although the surgery was successful, returning to work immediately seemed out of the question. With no savings and medical bills mounting, I felt overwhelmed. During this difficult time, Talia and Ria became my pillars of support. When Ria explained the situation to Talia, she was even more outraged than I had expected. Talia tried to track down Rogan to make him repay the debt and cover the medical expenses, but his whereabouts remained unknown. What should we do if we can't find Rogan? I wondered aloud. Talia then suggested an idea. What about the car? That's in your name. Rogan has it right now. Maybe we can try to get it back. Is that even possible? I'm not sure, I said, surprised. Talia explained further. I found out where Rogan is currently working. Surprisingly, he's at a different company inside the same building where I work. Although I usually work remotely, I've seen him there on occasion. With this information, we can make a plan, I said, eager to confront him. Then let's go to Rogan's workplace right away, I suggested. But Talia advised against rushing into things. We need a solid plan, not just a spontaneous approach, she cautioned. Ria and I have an idea, Talia continued. That's right, a plan, Ria confirmed, exchanging a smile with Talia. I couldn't quite grasp the significance of their demeanor as I watched them silently. Talia smiled reassuringly and said, Don't worry, everything's taken care of. What kind of plan had they concocted? They didn't provide details, but everything became clear a month later. While I was at Talia's house, a call came in. Glancing at the caller ID, I saw it was from Rogan. Initially, I ignored it, but it kept ringing persistently. Something must have gone wrong. Summoning my courage, I answered, and Rogan's frantic voice pleaded, Please help me. I'll explain later. Just come now. I'm in trouble. About to be arrested. He quickly shared his location and hung up. Talia and Ria, who had overheard the conversation, finally unveiled their plan. We reported the car as stolen, and it was Ria's idea, Talia explained, beaming with pride. Ria blushed and looked down, clearly grateful. I thanked them both profusely and rushed to where Rogan was waiting. The park he mentioned was surprisingly close to my home. Police officers were gathered around Rogan, questioning him. We hurried over to him. First, we explained the situation to the police officers and asked them to leave. Then Rogan invited us into his car and began explaining what had happened. As I glanced inside the car, I noticed a confident-looking woman sitting boldly in the passenger seat, her legs crossed, staring at us with a cold gaze. Thanks for coming, but why did the police show up? Rogan asked, clearly perplexed. He had been surrounded and questioned by the police, yet he seemed unaware of their presence. I was so shocked that I couldn't find the right words to respond. I reported the car as stolen, I finally said. After all, the car belongs to me. We're divorced, so there's no reason for you to be using my car. Reporting it stolen was the logical thing to do. You probably didn't expect to be accused of car theft. Dad, why did you leave us? Why won't you take responsibility for repaying the money? Explain yourself. Ria chimed in, addressing Rogan, who appeared shaken. Rogan sighed and looked at us with an exasperated expression, but he remained silent. If you refuse to speak, I'll have to involve the police, I warned him sternly. Using my name without permission is a crime. At this, Rogan began to speak hesitantly. Bit by bit, he opened up about his mistress, Lily, who had recently started working at the same company as Rogan. Their relationship began at a company welcome party and quickly turned romantic. Shockingly, Rogan discovered about 3 months ago that Lily was pregnant, evident from her growing stomach. So you chose her over us and left? I questioned, my tone sharp. Talia chimed in, interrupting Rogan's attempt to explain. She criticized his past actions, including his irresponsible behavior toward the family, frequent job changes, and quick temper. Rogan, seemingly lost in thought or simply ignoring Talia, remained silent. While Lily's irritation was evident, She pressed him about the $200,000 debt, but he stayed silent. Then Lily dropped a bombshell. He borrowed money in his wife's name to buy me luxury items. I was speechless. A $200,000 debt for gifts to Lily? What extravagances had he bought her? It was surprising how easily Lily revealed this information, considering it could incriminate them both if they were conspiring. As I pondered this, Rhea asked Lily about her pregnancy. "When are you due?" Lily replied, "In about 3 months." But the timeline didn't add up. She claimed to have been pregnant for 3 months, yet she was due in the same amount of time. Something didn't quite make sense. Isn't the timing a bit off? Talia noticed the inconsistency and questioned Lily further. "Is the baby really Rogan's? It seems strange for the due date to be in 3 months." Talia's suspicions were clear, though taken aback, Lily didn't seem inclined to hide anything. "Actually, the child isn't Rogan's," she confessed. "I thought about keeping it secret, but dealing with him further seemed like too much hassle, so I decided to come clean." "Is that why you admitted to the debt as well?" Talia pressed. "Yeah," Lily replied, her tone mocking. "There's no point in sticking with Rogan anymore." The atmosphere grew tense and uncomfortable. I wanted to leave immediately. Meanwhile, Rogan stared at Lily in disbelief. "What are you saying?" "This has to be a joke, right?" he exclaimed. "Why would it be a joke?" Lily retorted firmly. The tension escalated, making the air thick with unease. Talia took charge. "Anyway, I'm calling the police," she declared. Rogan and Lily protested, but Talia reminded them that borrowing money in my name was a crime, as was using the car without permission, especially since Rogan and I were no longer together. She instructed me to make the call, and despite their pleas, I did. Soon, the sound of sirens filled the air. It was a relief to know that they would face the consequences of their actions. The issues regarding the debt and the car would finally be resolved. In the end, Rogan and Lily faced legal repercussions. While they avoided prison, they were held accountable for compensation, repaying the debt, and child support. Despite attempts to lessen their obligations through legal means, Rhea's secret recording served as damning evidence, leading to their requests being denied. Rhea decided to record the conversation after being inspired by a scene from a TV show she watched with Talia. While I admired her quick thinking, I couldn't help but wonder about the content of the shows Talia exposed her to. Now, Rhea and I reside with Talia, without any commuting issues for Rhea's school, as our previous residence was conveniently close. The car was returned safely, and it appears Rogan is somehow managing the debt. If Rogan hadn't made those regrettable decisions, he wouldn't be facing such hardships now. Throughout this ordeal, Talia and Rhea have been instrumental, and thanks to them, the situation is gradually resolving. I am determined to work hard for a peaceful life with the two of them from now on.
I knew something wasn't right as soon as I walked inside our suburban house after a demanding day at the architecture business. I was startled to discover Amelia, my mother-in-law, rummaging through our dresser drawers with clothes all over them, when I heard muffled sounds drawing me upstairs to our bedroom. What the heck? I froze in the doorway, gasping. Amelia turned and tried to grin, but her gaze fell short of the papers she was holding from my dresser. She remarked jokingly, "I didn't expect you home so early, Alice. I'm merely trying to locate Ethan's birth certificate. For some documents, I need that." "In my underwear drawer?" I asked, astonished by her interference. Amelia dismissively waved a hand. "You never know what can be hiding in plain sight. Also, Ethan gave me a key a long time ago." Trying not to lose my cool, I shot back, "That doesn't allow you permission to invade our privacy whenever you want, and where is Ethan regardless?" Amelia said, working late, as she perused more documents. "Now be kind and help me find that birth certificate." I stomped across the room and grabbed the papers out of her grasp. "No, you must depart. Right now." Amelia's gaze grew strained. "I understand the situation. Alice, you've always been so far from me. My only goal is to support my son." "By plundering our bedroom?" I fired back. We'll talk about this when Ethan gets home. With a puff, she grabbed her handbag. Fine, but don't think this is over. I collapsed onto the bed as soon as she was gone, feeling too much for the mess and the argument that followed. Ethan texted me as soon as my phone buzzed, saying, "Mom said you kicked her out. What is happening?" I groaned and said, "Your mother broke in and looked through everything we had. When you get home, we should chat." I cleaned the bedroom for hours on end, my rage building. I braced myself as I heard the front door open. Ethan emerged, appearing hesitant. "I'm sorry for being late, darling." "Would you perhaps elaborate on why your mother was robbing our bedroom?" With my arms folded, I questioned. With a groan, he combed through his hair. "She claimed to require my birth certificate for a reason related to insurance. It's probably in the filing cabinet," I told her. "And without telling me, you gave her the key to our home?" With a widening of his gaze, Ethan saw my frustration. I didn't think it was a big deal. She's my mom, Alice." "Ethan, it's a huge deal," I firmly retorted. "She infringed upon our privacy. She looked through my belongings." He extended his hands. All right. I will speak with her, but you are aware of her nature. Most likely, she meant no harm." I gave him a disbelieving look. "Are you seriously backing her right now?" "No," Ethan replied, raising his voice. "I'm just saying maybe you're exaggerating a little." His remarks really struck home for me. Excessive sensitivity? You think I'm exaggerating because your mother broke into our house? Ethan grew stern-faced. "What do you know? I just can't handle this at this time. I'm spending the night at my mother's. Once you've cooled down, we can discuss." He rushed out, leaving our bedroom empty and me by myself. With a sickening sense, I realized that this was far from finished. Amelia had caused a rift between us, and I feared that it was just the start. I woke up the following morning alone, with the house's silence overwhelming me. That night, Ethan had not returned home. He texted me, "Staying at Mom's for a while," as my phone buzzed. "We require distance." As I prepared for work, I had a knot in my gut. How could things have gone so wrong so fast? When I attempted to call Ethan, the call went directly to voicemail. At work, I was having trouble focusing. Emily, my coworker, realized that I was preoccupied. "Alice, are you all right? You appear to have witnessed a ghost?" I rubbed my temples and sighed. "Yesterday, my mother-in-law broke into our home. Ethan is now living with her." Emily's gaze expanded. "What? That is absurd. How will you proceed?" My cell phone rang before I could respond. The name of Ethan flickered on the screen, saying, "I have to take this." I ducked into a vacant conference room. "Ethan, what's going on?" My voice trembled as I asked. "I'm stopping by to get some clothes from the house. I'll be there for lunch," he said, his tone impassive. "What do you mean, wait? How long do you intend to remain at your mother's house?" I applied pressure. "I'm not sure, Alice. Until you can figure out a way to get along with her," he snapped back, interrupting me. It was as though I had taken a punch to the gut. "But she's the one who—" He abruptly ended the call, interrupting me. The remainder of the morning passed slowly. Ethan's car was already in the driveway when I arrived home. Arming myself, I walked inside the home. Ethan was packing quickly into a duffel bag as he was in our bedroom. When I spoke, he hardly gave me a look. "Ethan, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "Can we talk about this?" He used more effort than needed to zip up the bag. "There's nothing to discuss. You're forcing me to pick between you and my mother because you overreacted. That's not fair," he yelled, his voice full of rage. "Ethan, she infringed upon our privacy. How are you blind to that?" I begged. With his eyes sparkling, he turned to face me. "My mom would never intentionally harm us. It's you who has consistently ignored her and shown her contempt." I was overcome with disbelief as I gazed at him. Are you for real this time? After all of her actions? Ethan took up the burden with a resolute attitude. I believe it would be better if I spent some time with Mom. Perhaps taking a break will allow us to view things more clearly. I had a terrible thought as he walked by me. Wait, did you tell her she could come here anytime she wants? I just needed his hesitancy as an answer. This is unbelievable, I muttered. You're choosing her over me. Ethan's mouth tightened. I am not making a choice. All I'm trying to do is maintain harmony. By allowing her to trample me? By discrediting my emotions? Tears were running down my face as I shook my head. Ethan, you're distorting everything. I really need some space for this reason. I was left alone in our home after Ethan left. The whole weight of the circumstance fell on me. My husband had deserted me, taken sides with his mother, and exposed me to her harassment. I fell on the ground sobbing uncontrollably. How could my life have flipped so drastically so fast? The house seemed enormous, with each vacant room serving as a sobering reminder of Ethan's absence. Amelia texted me, and my phone chimed. Dear, I hope you're happy now. Ethan filled me in on everything. Rest assured, I'll look after him well. I felt a rush of anger that immediately overshadowed my sadness. After deleting the message and not answering, I gave Emily a call. Can you come over? Shaking my voice, I questioned. I need a friend right now. I glanced at our bedroom while I waited for Emily to come. Everything brought back memories of Ethan and our shared life. Now, though, Amelia's presence and Ethan's betrayal seemed to tarnish everything. I reached into my closet and touched all of Ethan's clothing. Then I snatched them all and stuffed them into a box with an abrupt determination. It's okay if he preferred his mother over me, but I was not going to allow them to continue trampling all over me. I was going to reclaim my life and this house as mine. The sudden promotion was a welcome diversion from the gloom that had overtaken my life. I observed my reflection in the mirror as I stood there. Even though the bags under my eyes revealed many restless nights, I was determined to rejoice today. Then, with an abrupt resolution, I grabbed them all and shoved them into a box. If he would rather have his mother than me, that's fine. However, I refused to let them keep stomping all over me. I was going to take back this house and my life. The unexpected promotion provided a much-needed break from the despair that had taken over my life. I stood there staring at my reflection in the mirror. I was determined to celebrate today, even if the bags under my eyes were a testament to many sleepless nights. It was then that I spotted her. Amelia pretended to window shop across the street, but her gaze was always on me. My stomach fell out. For what duration had she been pursuing me? I picked up my pace and turned the corner, holding onto my shopping bag. I turned to see Amelia still there, following me like a shadow. I shook my hands and struggled with my car keys. I went inside, locked the doors, and inhaled deeply. What was she playing at? I hung the coat in my closet and ran my fingers over the plush material, muttering to myself. It was more than just a luxury purchase. It was a representation of my accomplishment and freedom. I was startled when the doorbell rang. I stepped forward slowly and looked through the spy hole. Ethan uneasily shifted as he stood on the porch. I slightly opened the door. "What do you have in mind?" I asked, maintaining a forceful tone. His voice was low as he inquired, "Can I step in? We need to talk." I let him in, against my better judgment. Ethan's gaze swept through the space, finally settling on the boutique shopping bag. "New clothes?" he inquired, his tone slightly acerbic. "I've been promoted," I announced while crossing my arms. I wanted to enjoy it. It clouded Ethan's face. "Must be pleasant, focusing on your professional life while our marriage falls apart." I yelled, "That's hilarious coming from you. You're the one who moved out, recall." His displeasure was obvious as he ran a hand through his hair. I didn't come here to fight, you see. You were out shopping today, Mom told me. Alice, she's concerned about you. Both of us are. It seemed as if someone had drenched me in freezing water. She told you so she had been following me? Ethan spoke in frustration. It's only that she happened to see you. And she got back to you right away, I added, raising my voice. Do you not see how screwed up this is? Ethan's mouth tightened. You're acting suspiciously. Mom is merely worried. She's not concerned. I cut him off. You're giving in to her obsession. That's sufficient. I'm done with your claims, yelled Ethan. I came here to try and make peace, but clearly that was a waste. I collapsed onto the couch with my head in my hands as he rushed out, slamming the door behind him. I lost the happiness I'd had earlier and was left with a sickening worry. I couldn't get rid of the picture of Amelia observing me and telling Ethan everything I did. I felt suddenly vulnerable in my house, my haven. I reached into my wardrobe for the coat, hands trembling. Amelia's curious gaze seemed to have tarnished its brilliance. I had to defend it, shield it from her encroachment. Something occurred to me. I would get a strong place to safely store my possessions. Now, it was more than simply the coat. It was about taking back my security and privacy. A notice appeared on my phone as I was doing internet research on safes. I hope you enjoy your new coat, dear, came from an unknown text message. It would be unfortunate if something were to happen to it. My blood became cold. Although Amelia did not sign anything, I knew she had gone too far. I wouldn't disregard it this time. I hesitated to take up my phone when I saw Ethan's number. What use would it serve? Never would he trust me over his mother. No, this was now my fight, and I was going to win it, Ethan or not. The day before I left on my work trip, the strongbox came. I felt a mixture of relief and melancholy as I ran my fingers over its chilly metal. How had things ended up here? I took my new coat and other valuables and carefully locked them away in my own house. Ethan's face flickered on the screen as my phone chimed. I was still determining if I answered. Are you there, Alice? He sounded forced in his voice. I am here, I answered in an impartial tone. Mom told me that you purchased a safe. Is that accurate? I shut my eyes, trying not to get angry. Amelia had, of course, been keeping an eye on the house. Yes, that is true, Ethan, and it is none of your business. He let out a deep sigh. Alice, do you not think that this is going too far? It's only a coat, really. The coat is not the issue, I yelled. It's about respect and privacy, something neither you nor your mother seem to get. A prolonged silence ensued. Ethan's voice was icy when he spoke once more. This journey makes sense, in my opinion. Before I could reply, the telephone went silent. We both need time to ponder. I had a hollow feeling in my chest as I glanced at the phone. How could we have gotten so different? I double-checked the strongbox the following morning before heading to the airport. I saw Amelia's car parked down the street as I secured the front door. My teeth tightened. Permit her to observe. I had nothing to conceal. The conference was a haze of networking and presentations. Alone in my hotel room at night, the reality of my circumstances struck me hard. I was grabbing my phone and looking through old pictures of Ethan and me together before Amelia got in the way. We looked happy and in love. I got an SMS from Emily on the third day. Hey, how are things going? Amelia has been spending a lot of time at your house. My heart pounded. I gave Emily a call right away. What do you mean? I asked, attempting to maintain a steady tone. I've seen her car parked nearby a few times, Emily stated. And yesterday I swear I saw her attempting to look through your windows. My thoughts were spinning. Emily, I need you to help me out. Could you check on the residents? Emily returned the call after an hour. I'm sorry, Alice. When I went to check, the rear door was ajar. I believe there has been a visitor. The entire globe appeared to be tilted. Did you enter? No, I wasn't trying to become involved. Do I need to call the police? Shutting my eyes, I resisted the need to panic. No, not just yet. I'm heading back home. In a few hours, I'll be there. Mind racing, I reserved the first available flight back. Had Amelia managed to get in? Had Ethan allowed her to enter? Or worse? I felt nauseated at the prospect. I glanced at my phone as the plane landed and saw a flurry of messages from Ethan. Where have you gone? Mom says there was a break-in at the house. Why do you not respond? I sped through the airport, ignoring them all, and hailed a cab. I felt dreadful the whole way home on the car ride. Upon arriving at my block, I noticed Ethan's vehicle parked in the driveway. My stomach fell out. I heard heated voices inside the front door as I got closer. Mom, I don't understand how you did this. Ethan's hurt and irritated voice. Sweetheart, I was just trying to protect you. That lady. As soon as I pushed open the door, the sound stopped. In the living room, Ethan and Amelia turned to look at me. My open strongbox sat on the coffee table between them. Ethan said, his face pallid, Alice, I can clarify. I wasn't listening, though. I stared at the strongbox with its contents all over the table. My coat was there, tightly held in Amelia's hands. There was a moment when something inside me broke. This was no longer just about a strongbox or a coat. This concerned my life, my union, and my prospects, and I was acutely aware that I needed to make a choice. I glanced at Ethan, then at Amelia, and back at Ethan. With a deadly calm voice, I stated, You have exactly 1 minute to get her out of my house. After that, you and I will have a discussion that will decide whether or not this marriage has a future at all. The silence that followed my outburst was deafening. Ethan's face paled, while Amelia's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on my coat. Alice, please, Ethan started, but I held up my hand. 1 minute, Ethan. The clock's ticking. To his credit, Ethan didn't hesitate. He turned to his mother, gently prying the coat from her hands. Mom, you need to go now. Amelia's face contorted with anger, but Ethan persisted. Now, Mom. Ethan ushered Amelia out. I stood rooted to the spot, my eyes fixed on the ransacked strongbox. My hands trembled as I approached it, surveying the damage. The lock had been forced open, the contents strewn about carelessly. After his return, Ethan shut the door. The sound reverberated throughout the home, accentuating the moment's seriousness. Alice, I spoke up, hardly audible above a whisper. Did you know she was going to do this? All Ethan had to do was remain silent. Something inside me snapped, like the last strand of trust. How can you, Ethan? My voice rising, I asked. How could you let her damage our home like this? With a look of frustration on his face, he ran a hand through his hair. I didn't anticipate that she would really enter. She expressed her desire to inquire about the situation during your absence. Exactly why? I said it again, skeptically. By breaking into our safe? Ethan looked from me to the strongbox and back again. I mentioned the safety to her. Alice, I was concerned about you. You've been acting really suspiciously recently. The words struck me like a blow to the body. I'm the one who's paranoid. Your mother has been breaking into our home and following me? Alice, that's not what I meant. Ethan retracted. Simply said, I fail to see why you required a safe in the first place. What do you have hidden from me? I was overcome with disbelief as I gazed at him. Nothing is hidden from you, Ethan. I'm defending myself against your mother's compulsive actions, which you continue to allow and support. Ethan grew stern-faced. Don't discuss my mother in that manner. She's only attempting to help. Help? I gave a sour laugh. By ruining our marriage? There was a long pause between us. I took a close look at Ethan and noticed a stranger for the first time. The man I married was no longer with me. He had pledged to support me. I believe you should go, I uttered softly. Ethan's gaze expanded. What? Come on, Alice. Let's figure this out. I shook my head and felt an odd peace descend upon me. No, Ethan, we are unable to. Not if you prioritize your mother before our union. It's unfair, he objected. I have no preference. You really are. I forcefully cut him off. You're picking her every time you justify her behavior and downplay my emotions, and I can no longer live this way. Ethan slouched his shoulders. What are you uttering? Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself to say something I never would have imagined to utter. I'm saying, I want a divorce. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as soon as I finished speaking. With a look of disbelief on his face, Ethan looked at me. You aren't saying that, he said hesitantly. I do, I answered, startled by how steady my voice sounded. Ethan, I love you. But I love myself even more, and I'm worthy of more than this. I glanced back to the chaos in the living room as Ethan staggered out of the house, appearing to be in shock. My lovely coat was on the ground, rumpled, a victim of Amelia's incursion. I took it up and pressed the wrinkles out. It stood for more than just acknowledging my accomplishments. It now stood for my independence, my dignity, and my resolve to not let my circumstances make me a victim. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. Time to give a lawyer a call. I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months, even though the path ahead would not be easy. I was reclaiming my life. This was my life. As I drove to Amelia's house, the lawyer's comments continued to play in my mind. Alice, are you certain you want to do this? Rarely do confrontations end well. I clenched my hands around the steering wheel. Not that I knew for sure, but I was sick of being the victim. Ethan's vehicle was parked in the driveway as Amelia's immaculate suburban house towered over me. Taking a deep breath, I marched to the front door and rang the bell as forcefully as felt appropriate. With a startled expression on his face, Ethan said, Alice, what are you... I shoved through him and into the home. Where is she? With a cheesy look on her face, Amelia emerged from the kitchen. Alice, dear, what an unexpected pleasure. I yelled at Amelia. Cut the act. I want my stuff returned, right now. With a confused look on his face, Ethan moved to stand between us. Alice? What things? What is happening? I gave a sour laugh. Oh, Amelia, you didn't tell him? Regarding the way you broke into our home and took my personal items? Amelia's smile wavered briefly before resurfacing with gusto. Dear, I'm very sure I have no idea what you're talking about. Your wife looks quite upset, Ethan. Maybe she should take a nap. Don't patronize me, I yelled, losing all composure. You've been trying to destroy our marriage from day one, and I'm done with it. Ethan's expression turned pale. Alice, please, let's talk about this calmly. Calmly? I said it again, skeptically. Ethan, your mom broke into our house. You're telling me to remain composed as she took my belongings? At last, Amelia's facade gave away. I was defending my son. The woman growled. You've never shown him the respect or consideration he merits. Someone needed to watch out for his rights. I looked up at Ethan, trying to read any encouragement in his face. My heart fell as I observed the uncertainty, perplexity, and, worst of all, a glimmer of agreement with his mother's remarks. Is that what you're believing too, Ethan? Silently, I inquired. That you don't appreciate me? He wavered, and I knew then that our time together was up. Ethan said, I just feel like your work always comes first. Of course she has, I cut in, my annoyance exploding. And you believed her over your own wife. Amelia grinned victoriously. You see, Ethan? You see, I told you that she doesn't get family values. Her career and her designer wardrobe are her only concerns. A part of me broke. My profession? My attire? Is that the main purpose of this? You invaded my privacy and broke into my house because you were envious of my success. With rage coursing through me, I turned to face Ethan. And you gave her assistance. You informed her about the safe and gave her the key. Ethan, how could you? Ethan's expression twisted. I never intended for things to go to this point. All I wanted was... What did you want, Ethan? I made a firm demand, my tone laden with suggestion. He said, I wanted you to pay attention to me. I gazed at the man I believed to be familiar. So you let your mother harass me and invade our home, all because you were unable to interact like an adult? Amelia stepped forward, hate shining in her eyes. Now please, let's not get too worked up. I was just that... With a low, menacing voice, I commanded them to leave. Get out now. Amelia blinked. Excuse me? Get out of my sight before I call the police and have you arrested for breaking, I said. Ethan grabbed me. Alice, please, he begged. I recoiled from his contact. Avoid, just don't, I sternly commanded. A noise outside caught my attention as I turned to leave. The Johnsons, our next-door neighbors, stood on Amelia's lawn, their expressions filled with worry. Is everything okay? It was Mrs. Johnson who called. We heard shouting. I turned to look at Ethan, then at Amelia, and I decided something that would alter my life forever. I made sure the neighbors could hear me say, no, loudly. Not everything is in order. My spouse assisted my mother-in-law in breaking into our house and taking my possessions. I was done listening, drowning out the horrified gasps from outside with Amelia's spluttering in indignation and Ethan's cries of desperation. With my head held high, I left the broken remains of a deceitful and manipulative marriage behind as I walked out of that house. The whole incident weighed heavy on my shoulders as I drove away. I understood that this was only the start of my battle to take back my life. As I brushed down my blouse, my hands trembled, and I caught a glimpse of my determined image in the hallway mirror. The noise from the living room began to reverberate within, a continual reminder of what I was going to do. I'd invited everyone in the neighborhood, our closest friends, and even a couple of Ethan's co-workers. Everyone was entitled to know the reality. I inhaled deeply as I entered the room and felt the quiet conversations abruptly stop as everyone's attention was fixed on me. Seated in the corner, Ethan's expression betrayed a mixture of perplexity and anxiety. Since I hadn't invited Amelia, she wasn't present. This was my chance. I started out by saying, "Thank you all for coming," sounding more composed than I actually felt. I realize you're wondering why I've brought you all together. I'm here to tell you the truth about what's been happening in our marriage, I said as our eyes met, and I could see panic growing in his expression. There was a general intake of breath in the room. I continued to describe the events of the previous few months, including Amelia's invasions. Don't believe me when I say that Ethan betrayed me and stole my belongings? I said as I took out my phone. There was Ethan's own statement that I had recorded I had made in private during our altercation at Amelia's house. A room filled with Ethan's voice. I never intended for things to go to this point. All I wanted was for you to give me some attention. Murmurs and gasps sprang out. Ethan leaped to his feet, his expression changing. Alice, please stop. You can't. Ethan, what? I made a challenge, my voice becoming raised. Unable to speak the truth? Can't reveal how your mother and you have been deceiving me for months? Mrs. Johnson, our neighbor, raised her voice. Ethan, is she telling the truth? Were you truly complicit in your mother's break-in? When Ethan's gaze raced around the room, he saw only shock and disappointment instead of sympathy. You don't understand, it's not. My mom was merely attempting to be helpful. Helpful? I gave a sour laugh. By taking my belongings? Through ruining our union? I turned to face the space. I wanted everyone to know that I'm tired of being silent, manipulative, and made to feel crazy for simply wanting privacy and basic respect in my own home. My eyes watered, but I blinked them away. I cherished Ethan. I believed that we were a team, yet he repeatedly favored his mother over our union. Ethan approached me, his face beseeching. Alice, please, let's figure this out. I swear, I'll tell Mom to back off. That's not possible right now, I replied, my voice cracking. I can no longer do this because you had so many opportunities to stand up for us, for me. I gave Ethan a manila envelope that I had taken out of my backpack. Ethan, these are the divorce documents, I said. I'm asking you to move out permanently. Chaos broke out in the room. Some friends came up to me and expressed shock and support, while others confronted Ethan and demanded answers. I held my ground the entire time, experiencing a strange mixture of heartbreak and relief. Ethan came over to talk to me one last time as the throng started to dwindle. His voice barely above a whisper, he questioned, Is this really what you want? When I truly looked at Ethan, I saw the man I had fallen in love with and assumed would be my lifelong partner. However, I also saw the man who had deceived me and allowed his mother to stand in our way. I want to feel safe in my own home and to be respected and trusted, I responded gently. Can you provide that to me, Ethan? His quiet was more than sufficient. I noticed him go away, and I felt a burden release from my shoulders. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months, even though the road ahead would not be easy. Amelia texted me and my phone buzzed. Alice, you're going to regret this. I am Ethan's need, not your. I felt a shiver go down my spine as I glanced at the letter. Amelia wasn't going to give up easily. This wasn't over. However, when I turned to face my friends who had remained to encourage me, I understood that I was no longer alone. I was prepared to face whatever came next. The next day, I observed Ethan packing his things in our shared bedroom and had a complicated combination of resolution and melancholy. Every object he put in a box felt like a more serious blow to our union. Ethan whispered, You don't have to do this, Alice. Things can still be worked out. With a calm voice, I shook my head. We're not able to, Ethan. Not after all that has transpired. With a groan, his shoulders drooped. I love you, even though I know I messed up. Is that not significant enough? Love is insufficient, I answered. Not in the absence of respect or trust. We looked outside when there was a sudden disturbance. We hurried to the window to witness Amelia, wearing a furious mask, charging up the driveway. I won't let you do this, Amelia yelled at a volume that the entire neighborhood could hear. Ethan, you can't let her win. Ethan's expression turned pale. He glanced at his mother and then back at me. The fight between the son he'd always been and the man he wanted to be was evident in his eyes. He muttered, I have to deal with this, and went downstairs. With a pounding heart, I followed. This was it, the real deal. As soon as Ethan opened the front door, Amelia raced through. How dare you? She growled at me. Everyone is now against us because of you. Everything is wrecked by you. Ethan responded, No, Mom, in a voice I hadn't heard in months. You carried that out. That is what we did. Amelia recoiled as if someone had slapped her. What are you talking about? Alice is right, I'm saying. We were in error. I'm done doing this. You were mistaken. But Ethan, Amelia said, her voice shaking, I'm your mother. My only concern is for your well-being. Letting Alice go is the best thing for me, replied Ethan, speaking gently. There was an unbearable silence for a while. Amelia's face was a whirlwind of emotions as she looked at Ethan and then at me. "You'll regret this," she spit out and turned to face the door. "You two, you'll see that you need me." My shoulders began to lighten as the door shut behind her. For the first time in months, I could clearly see Ethan when I turned to face him. He said, "I'm sorry," with tears in his eyes. "For all of it, you were worthy of better." I felt my own eyes well up as I nodded. "Yes, I did, but Ethan, you also did. I'm hoping you can now see that." He carried the final box he owned. "I do, and I hope eventually you can forgive me." A peculiar calmness overcame me as I watched Ethan drive off. The home was silent, but it was no longer stuffy. Now it was mine, really mine. I went to the closet and took out the expensive coat that I had purchased to commemorate my promotion, which Amelia had taken and from which I had since regained. I put it on and enjoyed the feeling of accomplishment and warmth it brought. I was standing in front of a mirror and could hardly identify the woman who was looking back at me. She appeared more assured and powerful. She had the appearance of someone who had overcome her worries. "How are you doing now?" was the text message from Emily that buzzed my phone. I replied with a smile. "I'm fine. Better than okay, I think. I'm at liberty." I understood the truth in those remarks as soon as I pushed submit. I felt liberated, unaccountable from coercion, uncertainty, and the need to apologize for who I was. There would be no easy journey ahead. There would be doubtful times, awkward chats, and lonely evenings. But I was excited about the future for the first time in a long time. After grabbing my keys, I left the house. I was prepared to meet the world head-on, my way, and on my terms. I said a gentle goodbye to the life I was leaving behind as I locked the door behind me. I was excited to see what would happen in this new chapter of my life, one in which I was the writer of my own tale.
Finally, I'm rid of that baggage. Starting today, my parents are moving in with me at my house. As soon as my parents passed away, my husband, Dennis, having demolished our family home, stood in front of its site and blurted this out to me. Standing there in shock, I asked, "What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind? Hurry up and bring the inheritance to our place," he said. At his words, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. So, that's what this was all about, I realized. What are you laughing about? Don't you guys know what you're talking about? Dennis and my in-laws looked at me quizzically as I laughed. It was then that I told them the truth. My name is Misery Nathaniel. I was born the eldest daughter to ordinary office worker parents. I have one brother, a very normal family. I married Dennis when I was 29, and we had 2 kids. Juggling work and parenting, I suddenly found myself at 55. My son, Sean, and daughter, Dennis, had grown up to be fine adults, each living on their own and struggling with their new careers. Now was the time to relax with my husband. It was an ordinary life, but I was happy. I thought I would continue to age like this, but my mundane life changed one winter day. My father was in a car accident and suddenly passed away. He was only 72 at the time. Our whole family was engulfed in grief, especially my mother, who was so depressed she couldn't even eat. "Mom, I know it's hard, but you have to eat," I told her time and time again. "I know, but I just don't have the appetite. It feels like there's something stuck in my chest. My brother and I thought she was just emotionally distressed and watched her for a while. However, she rapidly lost weight in just half a month. Worried, I took her to the hospital. Cancer, the doctor's diagnosis left me in shock. The cancer was advanced, and surgery wasn't an option. With about a year left to live, I hadn't had the chance to really take care of my parents yet. Just when I thought I had lost my father, now my mother too was facing this. I was even more devastated than when my father passed, but I didn't have the luxury of grieving forever. My brother lived far away and couldn't be relied upon, so it was up to me to take care of my mother. I immediately told Dennis that I wanted to live with my mother. I couldn't leave her alone, both emotionally and physically, in her illness. But Dennis's reaction was unexpected. "What? We just finished dealing with your dad's funeral, and now I have to be dragged into more of your family's issues," he said with a sigh, obviously annoyed. "You don't have to say it like that. Can't you just drive her to the hospital and back? Do we really have to live with her? I think she might feel lonely if it's not okay. Maybe I can just live at my family home for a while," I suggested. Then Dennis became indignant. "What? And who's going to take care of my meals while you're gone? I'll come and cook, of course. What about cleaning? Who's going to do the laundry?" I fell silent. I intended to do what I could, but I couldn't do everything as before. Being confronted with this reality hurt. If someone said I was being selfish for wanting to care for and nurse my mother, I wouldn't be able to argue back. I'm sure my mother, being considerate, would say everything is fine as it is, but I really wanted to do something for my parents. "Fine, but I'm not helping with anything, you hear?" Dennis grudgingly said to my silence. His attitude was arrogant, but he had ultimately agreed. "I'm sorry and thank you," I said. Although I thought he was being awful, he had agreed to my wish. I suppressed my desire to argue back and thanked him despite the trouble. Dennis and I started living with my mother at my family home. We had originally been living in a house provided by Dennis's employer. Dennis was an only child, and since Dennis's father really wanted us to live together, we didn't plan on buying our own home and were going to eventually move in with Dennis's parents. Living in the company housing was more convenient for work, and the rent was only about $600 a month, so it wasn't a big burden. But now that we've moved to my family home, we don't have to pay that anymore, and we have more space. I think living together wasn't all disadvantages for Dennis. True to his word, Dennis didn't help out with anything, but I'm glad I could live with my mother. She seemed energetic, but she often felt weak and spent a lot of time lying down during the day. I prepared her meals, fed her, and managed her medication. It would have been impossible for her to do all that alone. "I'm sorry, Misery, thank you. It's a big help that you're here with me." "I should thank Dennis too," my mother said, expressing her gratitude to us many times. She was unaware of the harsh words Dennis had said about living together, so she was grateful to him too. One evening, after my mother had gone to bed and Dennis returned home while serving dinner, I brought up the subject of my mother's treatment. Dennis glared at me and said, "I don't know what you want me to say. I told you I'm not helping with anything." He refused even to listen. I needed someone to vent to, someone to consult. All I wanted was for Dennis to listen. Even after a month, 2 months, Dennis's attitude didn't change. He constantly complained about living together, acting as if he was doing a great favor, and his behavior became increasingly obnoxious day by day. But I couldn't say anything against it. Between worrying about my mother and being considerate of Dennis, I was becoming more stressed. Around the time of the 1-year prognosis, my mother's condition worsened rapidly, and she was hospitalized. 3 days later, she passed away. Although I had prepared myself mentally, I was devastated. My brother's family and my children came right away and helped a lot, but in times like this, you really want your spouse by your side. However, Dennis was laughing and chatting with his parents in a corner, not helping with the funeral preparations at all. My brother had taken a lead role in preparation, and somehow we got everything ready for the funeral. But Dennis, who should have been sitting in the family section, was at the very back of the relatives section. "Dennis, I want you to sit in the family section," I said. But he replied, "No, I'm fine here. I'm not a blood relative after all." "But you're my husband," I said. Then his mother chimed in, "He's your husband, but he's not your mother's son. Dennis is our son, so he's an outsider, you know." "Yeah, Dennis's parents are just us. Misery should sit in the family section," she continued. Hearing this from my in-laws, I was left speechless. From where I come from, it's common for sons-in-law to sit in the family section at funerals, though this might vary by area. Sure enough, with Dennis not found in the family section, distant relatives started whispering, wondering if we had divorced. It's one thing for people to gossip, but all of this could have been avoided if Dennis had just sat there. Feeling a bit upset that Dennis wasn't by my side, we still managed to see my mother off peacefully. After the funeral, my brother's family, my children, Dennis, and his parents returned to my family home. "Thank you for coming, especially at such a busy time," I said to my in-laws, offering them some tea. They laughed and replied, "Really, it's something. First your father, now your mother. These funeral expenses are a burden for us too, but at least that's the end of it." I was stunned by their words. What did they mean by that? I couldn't believe they would say such a thing. I forced a smile and excused myself. Then I overheard Dennis talking with his parents. "It must have been tough for you, Dennis, living with outsiders," his father said. "Yeah, dealing with Misery's whims was a pain. A husband shouldn't just follow his wife's demands. If you don't like something, you have every right to refuse," his mother added. I clenched my fists. Their voices, laughing and chatting, were unbearable. But this wasn't new. Dennis's parents had always been insensitive and rude. When Dennis and I got married, his mother said, "Couldn't you find someone more attractive? I can't expect much for grandchildren." His father joked, "They say beauty gets boring after 3 days. With Misery, you won't get bored." And Dennis just laughed. "It's funny," he said. "Such a disrespectful family." I felt something snap inside me. Reflecting back, neither Dennis nor his parents had said a single comforting word to me, either at my father's funeral or after my mother's passing. Instead, they ridiculed me. I had felt sorry for imposing on Dennis, but now I questioned his behavior as a person. I had been too concerned about Dennis while just wanting to do right by my mother. I realized I shouldn't have felt so guilty towards Dennis, especially since he wasn't supportive. While I simmered in anger, Dennis and his parents continued to laugh and chat in another room. If my brother's family and my kids had heard them, they would have been upset, but fortunately, they were in the kitchen. I was relieved to be the only one who heard Dennis and his parents' conversation. Then I heard more from my mother-in-law. "Misery," she said, startling me. "Yes," I replied. "Can I have this?" she asked, holding my mother's purse. Confused, I stammered, well, your mother won't be needing it anymore, right?" Dennis suggested I take it home. "Maybe I'll just keep it," she said, holding up the purse, appraising it. I couldn't believe her audacity, especially right after the funeral. I took the purse from her and said firmly, "No, you can't." Her expression changed, not so much about the purse being taken away, but more about me, her daughter-in-law, standing up to her. Yet, I stood my ground. "We're not ready to sort through my mother's belongings yet. We'll distribute her keepsakes among the family later." My mother-in-law turned red with anger. "What do you mean? Are you saying I'm an outsider?" You said earlier at the funeral that even Dennis was an outsider to my mother. How come Dennis is an outsider, but your family? I retorted. Hearing this, Dennis and his father also turned red. What are you saying? Apologize to Mom. How disrespectful, a daughter-in-law talking like that. Their commotion drew everyone from the other room. I didn't expect to be called an outsider after all the effort we put into attending the funeral. Let's go home, Dad, my mother-in-law shouted at me in front of everyone and stormed out of our house. For some reason, even Dennis was angry and left with his parents. What happened? Did you really call your mother-in-law an outsider? Everyone asked me, having heard only her side, taken out of context. It might have seemed like I was the one being harsh, but I explained the situation to everyone. Not a single person blamed me. Grandpa and Grandma should be more considerate of other people's feelings. That's just how Dad and Grandpa have always been. My children sided with me. But I still couldn't forgive those three. Dennis hadn't come home for a while since that day. I hadn't contacted him either. I didn't think I should be the one to apologize, and I wasn't sure if I could forgive him even if he did. But I knew things couldn't stay this way forever. Then one day, Dennis came back. Welcome home, I greeted him, suppressing the anger that flared up at the sight of him. Really, Dad suggested this? It's surprising, isn't it? The kids were astonished by my proposal. It seemed like it really was a gift for Dennis. I wonder if Dad feels bad about what happened, I said, laughing. I gratefully accepted the travel vouchers for Dennis. I'll be off then. Yeah, take your time. Stay with the kids at their places too. Why not? Really? I can't be away that long. Don't worry about me. I'll relax at my parents'. Just enjoy yourself, Dennis said. With that, he sent me off. Dennis was happy to have me visit, so before the spa trip, I stopped by her place and then Sean's. I hadn't been able to visit them while caring for my mother, so I helped out by cooking and freezing meals for them. Mom, you should relax, but thanks, this really helps, they both said, delighted to have my cooking at home. This opportunity was all thanks to Dennis's suggestion. Then came the eagerly awaited spa trip. I spent a relaxing time at the hot springs with my children. The weariness from caregiving and the sorrow of losing my parents seemed to have healed quite a bit. I was away for almost a week, but both my kids returned to their homes with bright smiles. That was fun. We should thank Dad for once, Dennis said. True, just this once. But I wonder if he's up to something, she joked. Don't say that. Dad thought about us in his own way, I laughed. When I returned home, planning to share the memories with Dennis and start our life anew as a couple, however, when I arrived home, I was speechless. What? The house is. I looked around in disbelief. Despite recognizing the location, the family home that should have been there was gone. Then, out of nowhere, Dennis appeared, followed by his parents. They were grinning at me, standing there dumbfounded. Dennis, what's going on? I asked. With the same sickening smile, Dennis said, finally, I'm rid of that baggage. Starting today, my parents are moving in with me at my house. What are you talking about? I replied, trying to stay calm. Then he opened his mouth. Have you lost your mind? Your family home has been demolished. Bring the inheritance to our place quickly. Whatever you inherited, it's Dennis's now. I realized then. The disappearance of the house was Dennis's doing, and it was all for the inheritance. Such betrayal. After thinking about the future on my way home, I was filled with indescribable sadness and anger. But demolishing the house won't make things go Dennis's way. I won't let it. I burst into laughter at the sight of their smirking faces. My laughter baffled Dennis and his father. What? Why are you laughing? What a weird woman. Has she gone crazy? My mother-in-law looked at me as if I were something eerie. Facing the three of them, I spoke up. Don't you guys know what you're talking about? I said to him. First off, I haven't inherited a single penny, so there's no inheritance. After saying that, I burst into laughter again. Perhaps they mistakenly thought they'd become rich from the inheritance. Their wild imaginations and actions had me in uncontrollable laughter. What do you mean? Explain yourself. Dennis demanded. But I kept my mouth shut. I felt no need to enlighten them. Before that, I'm not going to live with strangers. If you want to live together, go ahead alone. Ignoring Dennis's question and rejecting his initial suggestion made my mother-in-law furious. You helped with your parents' housework, but you can't do ours. You're aware of the circumstances, right? I agreed to live together, didn't I? I told you I didn't want to live together. Have you forgotten that? You chose to live together to avoid housework, I said. Dennis and his mother bit their lips as I refuted them one after another. Also, demolishing the family home like that. There are things you just shouldn't do. I yelled at them and then left the scene behind me. Dennis's voice called out, "Where are you going?" But I didn't look back. Right now, I needed to find a place to sleep for the night, and I really didn't want to see Dennis's face. I immediately consulted a lawyer. Demolishing a house couldn't be that easy. The house is still in my mother's name. As I wondered which company had done it, an unbelievable truth came to light. Dennis and his father had demolished it themselves. His father, who worked in demolition, enlisted the help of acquaintances and even rented heavy machinery. The planning was meticulous. Moreover, they even gave me travel vouchers to get rid of me. Tears welled up in my eyes at the realization of being deceived, and the frustration was unbearable. Is there any way to punish all three of them? As I tearfully explained my situation, the lawyer smiled at me kindly. Dennis unlawfully demolished the house in your mother's name. He can be charged with property destruction and held liable for damages. Let's start by demanding a formal apology from Dennis and his parents. I nodded in agreement. The lawyer quickly proceeded with the necessary actions. A few days later, Dennis called me, furious about the legal notice he received. What? What's with this certified letter? Oh, you got it. You destroyed my precious house. Of course, you have to compensate. We said we were moving to my parents' place. I demolished a house that nobody was going to live in. You should be thanking me, not asking for compensation. Now bring the inheritance and come back home, he said arrogantly. Thank me for demolishing my house. Don't make me laugh. And what inheritance? It's not even been settled yet. I shouted back over the phone. Dennis was silent, seemingly taken aback by my anger, which I rarely displayed. The reason I laughed when the house was demolished was exactly this. I had a whole year with my mother. It was obvious that we would discuss matters of inheritance, so I told my brother, I don't want anything. Give it all to you. As a result, he inherited all the cash and stocks. He insisted that I should have the house, as he lived far away and couldn't manage it. If I wasn't going to live there, it could even be rented out. That was the plan for me to inherit the house anyway. Either you and your father restore the house to its original state or pay the amount specified in the letter. That amount of money, I was considering settling this amicably. Well, fine, if you can't pay, I'll file a police report and sue you, I declared. I'm sorry, I didn't think you'd get so angry. Of course, I'm angry. What do you expect? He began to make excuses. He seemed to think that if my family home was gone, he wouldn't have to live with his parents. Especially Dennis's father had always desired to live together. Dennis's father seemed to have a fondness for Sean and apparently wanted to live with him. Dennis had refused to live together before, citing difficult commutes, but his parents thought I was the one against it, so he convinced them by demolishing my house and making it seem like I'd move in with them with the inheritance. But I couldn't forgive him after hearing such a thing. Please give me a break. I didn't mean any harm. Dad's sorry too. If he's truly sorry, then agree to the settlement, I said and hung up the phone. Dennis kept calling in, sending messages apologizing. If you're sorry, just transfer the money. I pushed him away. I knew my childhood home couldn't be restored, but this was the only way I could process my unbearable feelings. Afterwards, I stayed at Dennis's place. This situation was known to my brother's family and my children. Although my brother must have been angry about our house being demolished without his consent, he said, I won't interfere, but I'll help in any way I can. Do what you think is best, misery. Everyone condemned Dennis's actions and supported me. A month passed without any compensation or alimony payment for Dennis. During that time, there was no contact from him. I couldn't stay with Dennis forever. I wanted to get the money as soon as possible to at least establish a living foundation. Contrary to my wishes, something unbelievable happened. It was revealed by Dennis. This apron looks a lot like Grandma's, she said, showing me her smartphone screen. I was surprised when I saw it. It was a listing on a flea market app. The apron Dennis mentioned, similar to my mother's, was a unique one I had made for her. What? This is Grandma's apron. I made it, so I'm sure, I said. Dennis quickly checked other listings. The seller seemed to have recently joined the app with no transactions or reviews yet. There were nearly 30 items listed, and to my horror, all of them belonged to my mother. I immediately realized it was Dennis. He was the only one who could have taken my mother's belongings after demolishing the house. I called Dennis right away. What's this about the app? Dennis responded, sounding annoyed. Furious, I thought Dennis was pretending not to know. Don't play dumb. You're selling Mom's things without permission, aren't you? Cancel those listings right now. Dennis, sounding panicked, replied, What? No, it wasn't me. Who else would do such a thing? I'm coming over right now to get everything back, I said and hung up. Then I immediately headed to Dennis's parents' house with Dennis. Where are Mom's things? I demanded as soon as we arrived and called out for Dennis. Confronting Dennis at the door, he stuttered, I don't know anything about it. Tell the truth, Dad. Dennis joined me in pressuring Dennis. He seemed flustered. Dennis's parents, noticing our presence, came out. Oh, Dennis, you're here, Dennis's mom greeted, smiling at the sight of her granddaughter. Angry, Dennis said. Grandma, tell Dad to tell the truth. The truth. Grandma's belongings that passed away recently, Dad seems to be selling them. At Dennis's words, Dennis's mom burst into laughter. Dennis, with a troubled look, kept repeating, it really wasn't me. Then his mother loudly exclaimed, Dennis is selling them. That's impossible. But because I am the one selling them, I said. I felt my blood run cold. Dennis probably knew about it. With a look that almost said, this is bad, he turned to look at his mother. Despite Dennis's shock, his mother cheerfully continued, What? It's a lot of work, you know. I have to pack everything carefully and make sure the photos look good. She seemed oblivious to the fact that she was selling stolen goods, chatting happily about the app. I struggled to restrain myself from lunging at her. Cancel the listings. Those aren't yours to sell, Dennis, red with anger and tears in her eyes, pleaded with her grandmother. However, Dennis's mother seemed displeased. What's the big deal? I finally found a hobby I enjoy. I use the things I can and sell the rest for a little pocket money. It's good for preventing dementia. I'm the only grandma left, so Dennis wants me to stay healthy and live long, right? She said nonchalantly. Pleading with her to stop had no effect. There was no sign of remorse. But if talking won't help, then action is the only option. Dennis, let's go. But it's okay, let's go. I pulled Dennis out of the house and headed straight to the police station. I wasn't planning to file a report for the demolition of the house, but theft is a different story. When I explained to the police that my mother's belongings were being stolen and sold, they acted immediately. Dennis's mother's account on the flea market app was suspended. The items wouldn't be sold anymore. I called Dennis on the way back from the station. I had your mother's account stopped. You knew about it, right? You're complicit. No, I filed a police report about this. Please cooperate with the investigation. Dennis became frantic. We're family, right? Withdraw it, please. Family. You still haven't paid any compensation for the house nor alimony, and there's no sign of remorse. Faced with my shouting, Dennis was taken aback. But I'm not heartless. Despite everything, I have feelings for Dennis, having lived with him for so long, I said, sighing. I'll wait for the money, but I won't forgive the theft. Return everything. And Dennis, your father looked quite unwell. Has he seen a doctor? What? I'm not a monster, so just passing on that message, I said and hung up. Dennis's father, whom I had just seen, was alarmingly thin and hadn't spoken much. His complexion was more than just pale, it was unnaturally dark. His ill health was obvious, but that family probably hadn't noticed. His wife nonchalantly selling stolen items and Dennis, who only acted tough with me, they lacked any real concern for others. The next day, I received a call from Dennis's father. Expecting it to be a thank you call, I was met with the complete opposite. What do you mean by treating me like a sick person? Planning to dump me in a hospital to get rid of the hassle. I need to protect Dennis and my wife from you. I'm not going to any hospital, he scolded. It was shocking to be reprimanded when I was just concerned. Sorry for overstepping. I was just worried. I'm not frail or short-lived like your parents. Don't make a fool of me, he said. I was infuriated by his words, but a few days later, he apparently felt unwell enough to visit the hospital. The diagnosis was terminal cancer. Dennis called me in a panic. Dad got terminal cancer. What am I going to do? But I just snorted. I don't know. What did you say when I suggested going to the hospital? He said, I'm not frail or short-lived like your parents, so deal with it yourself. How can you be so heartless, misery? I never thought you'd be such a person. Who's heartless? Did you ever say a single warm word when my mother was sick? Reflect on your own actions, I said and hung up. As expected, Dennis's father passed away soon after. As a human being, I didn't want to harbor negative feelings towards the deceased, but recalling everything that had been done and said, I couldn't shed a tear after his funeral. His will was found. Despite all his talk of not being short-lived, he had made thorough preparations. The house goes to the grandson, Sean. The rest of the estate is to be divided between my wife and eldest son, I read. I was surprised to see Sean's name. Dennis's father had always favored him, wanting to live with him. He must have wanted Sean to have the house even after his death. It was a nuisance for Sean. Renounce the inheritance. You don't need that house, do you? I told Sean. But he was happy to receive it. Inheriting the house was more of a burden than a benefit due to inheritance tax, but if he was pleased, I had no right to say anything. Following the will, Sean inherited the house. His grandmother was happy and paid the inheritance tax. He's our successor after all, she said. Well, that's not wrong, I said, while I felt a bit sad, as if Sean had been taken from me. something unbelievable happened next. "Come over to our house," Dennis's call prompted me to head straight to his parents' house. Then I saw Dennis's mother and Dennis himself standing in front of their house, stunned, just like I once had been. The site was filled with heavy machinery trucks labeled with demolition company names and workers. Their house was being torn down right before our eyes. "What's going on?" I asked. "It's my house. I can do what I want with it," Sean said, appearing from somewhere, looking satisfied as he watched the demolition. "Sean, what are you doing? Stop this right now." "Stopping it now won't make it livable anyway," Sean said. "Shah, what have you done?" Dennis's mother and Dennis were begging Sean. But Sean just laughed. "Did you forget what Grandpa and Dad did to Mom?" "Sean, Grandma, you were awful to Mom too, right? Did you apologize?" Sean's smile turned into a sharp glare at Dennis's mother and Dennis. They fell to their knees. The heavy machinery continued to noisily dismantle their house. I finally felt relieved seeing this scene. Later, Dennis finally paid the damages and compensation from the inherited assets. The stolen items that Dennis's mother took from my mother were retrieved by Sean and safely returned to me. "You always have me and Dennis," Sean said, and I finally shed tears of relief. Dennis's mother and Dennis, having lost their house and left with no money, were now living in a company house again. Dennis and I had moved out of the company house, but now Dennis and his mother had to return, becoming the subject of rumors. I explained the whole truth to Dennis's colleague's wife, who we were on good terms with. "Dennis and his mother will likely have a hard life in the company housing, but it's their own doing. Additionally, after Dennis's retirement, they'll be forced to save up for a new place to live," I said. "I sometimes think about asking my friend how Dennis and his mother are living now, just to have something to talk about." After that, I continued to stay at Dennis's house, but then Sean got engaged to be married. He was planning to build a house. The land of the former family home sold for a decent amount, and I was glad to see that even that house served a purpose. "Mom, come live with us," Sean offered. His fiancée welcomed me warmly. Since I couldn't keep relying on Dennis, who lived alone indefinitely, I decided to take up on Sean's offer. I am thinking of living happily with my new family, determined not to become a mother-in-law like my own mother-in-law. Let's conclude the story shortly. Misery, now living with Sean and his fiancée, found a newfound peace. She was surrounded by love and support, a stark contrast to the toxic environment she'd endured with Dennis and his family. The inheritance drama had settled, leaving Dennis and his mother to face the consequences of their actions. They were back in the company housing, their lives a stark reminder of their own greed and lack of empathy. Sean, having inherited the family home and using the money from its sale, built a beautiful house for himself and his fiancée. Misery felt a sense of closure, knowing that the land that had held so many memories was now being used to create a new, happy home. Though she couldn't erase the pain of her losses, she had learned valuable lessons about family, loyalty, and the importance of standing up for what's right. She vowed to cherish the love she had found with her children and their families, and to never again allow herself to be taken advantage of. The bitterness of her past had finally faded, replaced by a quiet, contented happiness. Thanks for watching. How did you find the story? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories like this. Your feedback and support mean a lot.
My loving husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. To cope with the sorrow, I threw myself into my work. One day, a man claiming to be a lawyer approached me. Your husband has submitted a request for $5 million in damages. Are you having an affair while he's sick in the hospital? He asked smugly, presenting photos he claimed were evidence of my infidelity. I was stunned. I have no idea what you're talking about. We've already gathered evidence proving that you're the woman too busy dating to care for her sick husband, the man continued arrogantly. Feeling as if my entire life was being challenged, I decided to take him to my home to show him the truth. Along the way, I discreetly signaled to a middle-aged neighbor. My name is Melissa, and I'm 27 years old. I currently run multiple web media platforms and make a living from it. Sitting in my living room, I muttered to myself as I stared at the computer screen filled with text. What should I do about this? Melissa, let's take a break, my husband Kevin said, coming out of the kitchen and handing me a steaming cup of coffee. Thank you, I smiled at my partner, who sat beside me. Kevin is not just my husband, he's also my work partner. I've always loved writing, so I started as a web writer during college. But after a few months, I hit a wall due to my inexperience. A friend introduced me to another web writer, who would later become my husband, Kevin. He taught me everything from writing skills to how to get work. Initially, we were just colleagues, but our relationship gradually deepened. We became indispensable to each other, transitioning from colleagues to beloved partners. After graduating from college, we went into business independently as web writers and started to run and operate web media platforms. Our relationship evolved from partners to a unique family. Now, as a married couple, we work from home and are always together, both for work and in our private lives. When I tell my friends, they ask, "Don't you get tired of being together all the time?" But we find it comfortable, thanks to Kevin's calm and gentle personality. I never doubted that my life with my loving husband would continue forever. One day, prompted by a friend, we decided to go for cancer screenings. We often joked about our good health, but with a friend's relative getting diagnosed with cancer, we thought it was a good time to get checked. As it turned out, I was fine, but Kevin needed further testing. By this point, a sense of unease had already set in. Kevin kept saying, "I'm fine, nothing's going to be wrong," Kevin reassured me, but I couldn't shake off my worry. Then the detailed test results came back. Kevin had cancer. Moreover, the doctor told us it was at an advanced stage because it was detected late. I collapsed right there and then. Kevin had cancer and it was advanced. We'd had yearly checkups and nothing had ever seemed off. Sure, he had some cold-like symptoms once in a while, but Kevin always said, "I can work from home," and never really went to the doctor. If only I had noticed something back then. If only I had forced him to go to the doctor. Regrets kept flooding my mind, but then the overwhelming fear that he was going to be gone hit me, and I couldn't think of anything else. Kevin was admitted to the hospital immediately, and I visited him every day during my work breaks. When I came to see him, Kevin always greeted me with his calm smile. He would even happily ask about the progress of our work that we both put so much effort into. Seeing his face made me think, I have to protect this job no matter what. And even as I wiped away tears, I kept working. But every time I let my guard down, the fear that Kevin might be gone consumed me. To distract myself from the sorrow, I took on a part-time job at a nearby supermarket in addition to our web media work. Days went by like this, and a little time passed. As usual, I visited Kevin in the hospital, finished my shift at the supermarket, and was on my way home. When I get home, I need to do the web work and also clean the house, I thought, planning out my next tasks. Suddenly, the world in front of me started spinning, and I sat down in a panic. What's happening? I feel sick, I wondered. My vision continued to spin, and cold sweat wouldn't stop. Feeling helpless, I sat there, and suddenly I heard a surprise, "Huh?" A concerned person was hurriedly approaching. A gentle hand was placed on my slumped shoulder, and a kind voice asked, "Are you all right?" Looking up, I saw an unfamiliar middle-aged woman looking at me with concern. "I'm feeling a bit unwell, but I'll be okay," I tried to assure her. I mumbled, trying to stand up despite my spinning vision, but the woman who caught me said, "Come this way." She almost dragged me along to some place. We arrived at a familiar suburban house. "Where is this?" I asked, gazing vaguely at the house. "This is my home. Rest here for a while," she said, taking my hand and leading me inside. Despite it being our first meeting, her warm hand oddly comforted me, and I followed her in. We sat in the living room sipping water, and then she encouraged me to lie down on the sofa. Even as I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, she wet a towel in cold water, wrung it out, and placed it on my forehead. She also covered me with a blanket. A little while later, my vision stabilized and my sweating stopped. Slowly sitting up from the sofa, I faced the concerned woman and asked, "Can I move now?" I thanked her and added, "By the way, I realize I never introduced myself. Sorry about that." Upon hearing this, the woman smiled with relief and introduced herself as well. Her name was Laura, and she lived here with her husband. I began to say, "I also have a husband," but an image of Kevin lying in bed interrupted me. Noticing my hesitation, Laura said, "It's okay if it's hard to talk about it," and asked why I was sitting on the side of the road. "Actually, my husband is sick." I slowly told her about Kevin's illness, which I hadn't even shared with friends, and how I'd been overexerting myself with work to distract from the sadness. Laura held me tightly as I choked up and finally shed tears. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said, crying along with me. Later, I found out that Laura's house was very close to mine. What's more, our house was apparently known in the neighborhood as the wealthy couple's house due to its size. Chuckling to myself, I suddenly remembered. When I used to walk around the neighborhood with Kevin, people would often strike up friendly conversations with us. It feels like things have become distant since Kevin got hospitalized. Laura told me, people thought you two had separated and didn't know how to approach you. Through meeting Laura, my days slowly started to change. I got to know the neighbors I'd previously avoided, and we started gathering at our houses for tea. Every time I struggled to watch Kevin's health deteriorate, Laura was always there to touch my hand and encourage me with her warm touch. Then one day, Kevin received permission for a temporary return home, marking a long-awaited moment. A temporary return home, these words signaled the last moments we'd get to spend with Kevin. I decided to make the most of this time and fill it with smiles. "So, Kevin, now that you're home, is there anything special you want to do?" I asked. The first thing he said was, "I'd like to see Laura." While Kevin was hospitalized, I had told him how Laura and the neighbors had been taking good care of me during my daily visits. To fulfill Kevin's wish, I let Laura know we'd be stopping by on our way. A quick glance at Kevin revealed a certain resolve in his face as he stared straight ahead. We arrived at Laura's, who welcomed us with her ever-present warm smile. She took Kevin's hand and said, "You really are loved," her eyes meeting mine as she smiled. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I told Kevin, "Well, our eyes meeting," his face a mix of laughter and tears. During a break in the conversation, as I was about to head back to the living room from the restroom, I overheard Kevin's earnest voice from the other side of the door. I listened closely and realized he was talking about me. "Please look after Melissa when I'm gone." Hearing those words, I felt a stinging pain at the back of my nose and realized tears were falling. So that's why Kevin wanted to come here. Hearing Laura's gentle, "Of course," I couldn't stop my tears. Not much later, my husband Kevin drew his last breath. While I was prepared for it, the sense of loss hit me harder than I had imagined. Laura and our neighbors kept encouraging me during my grief. After some time had passed, a renewed sense of purpose pushed me to resume my career. I even continued my part-time job at the supermarket, thinking I needed to keep moving forward. Life went on just like that for about 2 years. One day, as I finished my shift at the supermarket and stretched my tired body, a voice came from behind. "Excuse me," startled, I turned around to see a serious-looking man wearing glasses. Did he lose his way? Without much thought, I asked, "Can I help you?" Clearing his throat, the man smiled softly and spoke, "I apologize for the sudden intrusion. I'm a lawyer. You're Melissa, correct? May I speak with you?" A lawyer? What could he possibly want with me? Though I was puzzled, I agreed to listen. "Sure. You see, your late husband Kevin has left you a settlement of $5 million. I was surprised when the man mentioned Kevin's name, and even more startling was the word settlement, almost causing me to drop the bag I was holding. "What? No, there must be some mistake. Ma'am, we have all the evidence. While your husband was in the hospital, you've been having an affair, haven't you?" The man smirked and pulled out his smartphone, showing me a photo. "What is this?" The photo showed a man and a woman, arms linked, walking away from the camera. I had to admit, the woman in the photo bore a slight resemblance to me, but it was definitely a case of mistaken identity. "That's not me, and I don't know that man. Besides, my husband passed away 2 years ago." I laid out the facts and was about to walk away when the man suddenly raised his voice to stop me. Lies about him being dead won't work. We already know you've been dating around while neglecting your sick husband. I was stunned. I remembered the days when I was rushing to Kevin's hospital every day and working nonstop. What could this guy possibly know about me? I wondered. Isn't it common sense for a real lawyer to offer a business card? Shouldn't he have notified me through documents or a phone call rather than meeting me in person? I shook my tired head and stared at the man. He wasn't going to back down. Realizing we wouldn't reach a conclusion, I decided it would be quicker to just show him. Please come this way, I said, inviting the man into my home. In hindsight, it was a bold move, but I felt emotionally charged, like he was negating my entire life. As I walked home with the man, I crossed paths with Laura, who was holding a shopping bag. Laura looked surprised but understood something when I raised my palm. She acknowledged and returned the gesture. I opened the front door and ushered the man inside. Clearly thinking he'd successfully manipulated me, the man enthusiastically said, "Let's discuss the paperwork inside." Ignoring him, I led the way to a certain room. "Please come in," I said. It was a room with a memorial altar, pictures of a smiling Kevin from when he was healthy displayed on it. "Wait, he really is dead," the man said, his face pale. "My husband is no longer in this world, so your claim for compensation is simply impossible," I said, adding internally, he would never have done such a thing even if he were alive. Noticing the man claiming to be a lawyer glancing around, he muttered under his breath, "That's not what I heard. This can't be right." He then casually pulled out his mobile phone to check something. I subtly peeked at the screen from behind and saw a photo of a vibrant Kevin taken before his battle with illness. "What? What's the meaning of this?" I demanded, unnerved that this man had a photo of my loved one. The man started talking hastily, as if making an excuse. According to him, he had purchased information about me and Kevin, who were known as a wealthy couple in the neighborhood, from a man claiming to be an informant. His intention was to scam us. The information said the husband of the wealthy couple was in the hospital, and the wife was emotionally vulnerable. Moreover, the informant had tried to squeeze more money out of the man by feeding him a lie that your wife is cheating on you, even providing fake evidence photos to back up the claim. I had no idea he was dead. That guy tricked me. The irony of the scammer himself being scammed left me sighing in disbelief. Then the man, who had been mumbling to himself, stood up straight and looked at me with a creepy smile, saying, "Well, if I'm caught, I'm caught." A shiver ran down my spine, and I broke into a cold sweat. Just as the man took a step toward me, the sound of hurried footsteps came from the entrance, and a moment later, several officers burst in, shouting, "Police." The tension I'd been unconsciously holding released, and I collapsed on the spot. Thank God they made it in time, I thought, recalling the moment when I crossed paths with Laura on the street a few minutes earlier. In reality, the hand I'd raised to Laura wasn't just a simple greeting. After Kevin's death, Laura had taught me the SOS hand signal, a raised palm with a clenched thumb, saying, even without words, you can say, "Help me." Betting that the signal would get through, I used it. Probably understating my SOS, Laura must have called the police. Staring at Kevin's photo on the altar, I silently apologized in my heart. "I'm sorry for putting you in harm's way." In the photo, Kevin seemed to be smiling as if to say, "It can't be helped." The arrested man, upon questioning, turned out to have committed multiple frauds before and would likely serve a fairly long prison sentence. I also heard that the notorious informant had been caught. A few days later, when I visited Laura's place with a thank you gift, she scolded me, "You shouldn't let a suspicious man into your house." Laura had noticed my SOS and was going to intervene but decided it was better to let the police handle it. Then she gently tapped me on the head as if to imprint her words, "Kevin asked me to look out for you, so please don't do anything dangerous from now on." At those words, tears welled up in my eyes. Ever since then, I've been living happy days, helped by Laura and the folks in the neighborhood. Today, I put my hands together in front of the photo of Kevin on the altar. "Even in a world without you, there are plenty of people who help me. You can rest easy," I whispered to myself. When I gently opened my eyes, there was a comforting smile in Kevin's photo that seemed to watch over me. Smiling back, I said, "All right, let's get to work today," and stood up with enthusiasm.